Lucifer News Lightbringer presents the mythical astronomy of ice and fire. Signs and Portals, Part 2. Sansa locked in ice. Live podcast show. Special guest, Maester Merry.
Hello, everyone. No, only one intro. Only one intro today. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to Signs and Portals 2, Sansa Locked in Ice live podcast stream. And I am joined by two very special guests today. Maester Merry to read the quotes as last week, and also Sanrixian. So say hi, Maester Merry.
Hello, everyone. I'm super pumped for this episode.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? I'm
So
Sanrixian.
smooth, so smooth. This is just like a dream.
Sorry. I'm awake.
Maester Merry gave a rousing hello and then just stopped. I was waiting for like, I'm from the Up From Under Winterfell YouTube channel and I have a wig.
Terrible at self-promotion, but great at promoting my costume. This is like one of my favorite things ever, and Sanrixian reminded me to wear it. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thankfully, no wardrobe malfunctions were had.
All right. Well,
Gotcha,
my second guest is, of course, the one and only Sanrixian, who is hard at work drawing something. What are you drawing there, Sanri?
This is a Sansa with purple serpents in her hair. So we're doing a special see if I can beat the clock and paint these episode, right?
Cool. Well, you've got, so what I've done, guys, is I've given Sanrixian the script ahead of time. So she knows approximately like what scenes we'll be doing in what sections. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to leave Sanrixian to draw during the section. And then in the section break, we're going to check in and see what kind of masterpiece that she has created. And then we'll sort of do that every section. And like I said, we're going to follow up at the very end. We'll have a little bit of Q&A discussion, take a few questions. And of course, then Sanri will start drawing cartoons of whatever silly things that we made up during the cast, as usual.
Oh, I have a list from last cast, too. Don't worry.
The list is growing. I'm making T-shirts faster than, or at least I'm throwing out ideas. Not me, but all of us collectively with our madness. As I
think I'm up to like 20.
Sanri and Sanri Music T-shirt Factory. But you'll have to weed through the bad ideas and figure out. Let's Jinxlier in the chat has asked Up From Under Winterfell if she has a link for tipping or sending you some golden dragons, something like that.
I said I don't right now. Just give me follows. Just watch my stuff. Tell me what you think. That's all I can ask for.
Yeah, you can send that money to. Also, there's other good causes in the fandom. A Search of Ice and Fire is a resource that all of us use like every day, and they run on donations. So I'll just throw that out, Maester Merry, on your behalf as a potential.
Please do. I certainly use A Search of Ice and Fire every day. The most important search engine in my life.
Yep.
Yeah, after Patreon, it's A Search of Ice and Fire holding the fandom community together, I think.
Right.
And we've got some other links dropping in the chat. We've got Sanrixian T-shirts and the Up From Under Winterfell YouTube channel. If we'll be there shortly. Let me just, in fact, I can actually put that one in there. But in any case, Maester Merry, as we mentioned last week, has a couple of cool videos on Bravos. Looks like, 3 now. We've got a third one.
Yeah, the last one is specifically about green seer magic, and I talk a lot about actually areas where the veil between the world is thin. So it's pretty on point for your series right now as well. A different style, a different take on it, but similar kinds of themes about where the influence of magic is and how you find and ferret out kind of the symbols George is using for that kind of stuff, but in this case specifically in Bravos.
Nice. Yeah, as we delved into that a little bit in the Weirwood Goddess series when we followed Arya to Bravos, and we definitely noticed a lot of green seer symbolism lurking about. So yeah, that's it's the great debate is how much of it is purely symbolic parallels and how much of it might be, you know, back channel magic connections. But we'll leave you to sort that out, Maester Merry.
I'm on it, up to the task. We'll see how many videos it takes.
No, that's always the question. That's always the question. So there, just briefly, I'd like to address the YouTube shenanigans. There has been some YouTube shenanigans. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably heard about this already. But basically, YouTube has demonetized my channel, which was a very upsetting email to get. And basically, that means that I can't receive super chats or put ads on any of my videos. And that is kind of a bummer. I make most of my income through Patreon, or at least the Song of Ice and Fire income. But I had been starting to get a little more from YouTube. And without that monetization, that is a little bit of a blow. And I won't bore you with all the details, but it's a little bit frustrating because they're telling me that I've duplicated content, which I haven't done intentionally, but they won't. It's weird. In the past, they flag a specific video and they'll say, you know, this video has a copyrighted song or an image or something. And then you can, you know, you can't monetize that one video and you can fix it and then it's all good. But for some reason, they've demonetized the entire channel and they won't tell me what video it is that's breaking the policy. And I'm assuming it's some sort of, I don't know, like maybe I played a little bit of a song or something on a live stream one time. I've got no idea what duplication they're talking about. And they, like I said, they won't tell me what video it is. So I'm going to write to them, and their normal process is they don't have an appeal that you can do. So I don't really have much hope for my email being answered. Basically, they're telling me in 30 days, I can reapply for monetization as long as I've fixed whatever on my channel is violating the policy. But of course, that's really hard because they're not telling me what video it is that's violating the policy. So right now it's a little bit of an impasse, and hopefully I'll get it resolved, but I don't want you guys to worry about it too much. That's, like I said, YouTube is not going to stop me by any means. And, I'm looking at Twitch as an option. Maybe I'll get this thing straightened out, but one way or the other, I'm going to keep doing live streams and podcasts, of course. And I would like to right now thank everybody for the huge outpouring of support that I've received. I had a bunch of people sign up for Patreon as soon as I posted about it. A lot of people that were saying, I've been listening forever. I've been meaning to sign up, and I saw your note, so I signed up today. Even one of my oldest Westeros friends, Durrandon, signed up for Patreon. So I just want to thank you guys so much. I was really bummed out for about half a day after I got that email. And then the Patreon thing started rolling in, and I was like, wow, okay, everybody's got my back. So really appreciate that, guys. Bronze Staries, even a couple of my regular patrons kicked up their donations. So just thanks so much, every guys, and just know that that's made a big impact for me. And I'll keep you guys updated. But for today, instead of super chats, what we're doing is the paypal.me, and it's very easy. All you have to do is type in mythical astronomy at paypal.me right in your web address. You don't have to log into PayPal or even have a PayPal. All you do is put in mythical astronomy at paypal.me right in the browser address field, and then you can send a little mythical astronomy donation if you want, and I will give you a shout out here on the live stream. So it is, and the nice thing about that is that super chats, actually YouTube keeps like 25 or 30% of super chats, which a lot of people didn't know. So the paypal.me doesn't have that problem. And the last part of this is that everyone who sent in super chats last week, that money has been seized by YouTube, apparently. In the note that they sent me, it says you will not be able to withdraw money from your AdSense account, which is where those super chats go. So I don't know if I'll be able to get that eventually if I'm remonetized or not, but it definitely kind of seems messed up and makes me not want to use super chats, even if I get all of this like squared away in the future. So I probably will continue to use the paypal.me, and I'm looking for a way to integrate it into my little interface or whatever, but won't bore you to tears with all that. We will eventually deal with all that. So That being said, we are set to do an awesome live stream today. YouTube be damned. And yes, it is some bullshit, but like I said, you know, I'm not dwelling on the negative. I'm choosing to focus on the support that y'all are sending me and awesome material that we want to talk about. So that's what we're doing today. And like I said, I'll keep you updated on Twitter. And if you guys have some suggestions about, you know, what to do, then send me maybe like a Twitter DM or something. If you know, I'll look at the chat on the replay, but I probably won't catch it right now. So that being said, I think we are ready to start, folks. Ready to start. Let me put a little drink of vitamin water here. All right. Maester Merry, do you have the link up, ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Oh, and in fact, guys, I've actually just published the script for this one. Some people like to read along, and so I'm going to throw that in the chat real quick. It is live. It's also linked from the menu, the front page menu at lucifermeanslightbringer.com. And yes, the headphones seems to be a mystery. Guys, I just ran my headphones under my shirt so that the white cable doesn't interfere with my beautiful bloodstone necklace. It's
Respect the necklace.
Yeah, it's just tucking them in there. Why not? And by the way, I wore this shirt today because it's something of an inverse of our subject matter. It's like an ice dragon locked in fire. We're going to be talking about, you know, the opposite, but whatever. Go Dubs. So the crystal is a bloodstone. It's a bloodstone. Let me hold it up so you can see. It's got lots of good yellow in this one. Some bloodstones have that gold, and this was a nice piece, so I snagged it when I saw it. All right. So, folks, here we are. Friends, patrons, YouTube viewers, and podcast listeners, myth heads of all sorts. Welcome to the Sansa at the Eyrie episode, where we'll be spending most of our time talking about Sansa on her way to the Eyrie. I know, on her way to the Eyrie. That's right. We all want to build snow castles of symbolism together in the Godswood at dawn, but before we do that, we need to trace out Sansa's symbolic path that took her there. Because, boy, let me tell you, there is some high-powered mythical astronomy and incorporation of world mythology going on with Sansa as she flees from King's Landing and arrives at the Vale. We will take her there, all the way there, but it's going to require yet another episode, or perhaps even two, to really get into all her scenes at the Eyrie. And then, of course, we need to compare those to Tyrion and Catelyn's scenes in the Eyrie from A Game of Thrones, and then bring in a couple of the Winds of Winter Elaine Stone chapters as well. So lots more material. But before we begin, let me just say that Sansa really is one of my favorite characters, as I said last week. And that's even setting aside Sophie Turner's good looks and charm. We recently actually got a Twitter thread going where we sort of threw out of some various Sansa moments of awesome, and it went on for like a day and a half. It was really amazing how many there were, because a lot of them are kind of under the radar, subtle moments that you don't remember. They're not sword fights. But when you go back and start highlighting them, she has all these underrated moments where she stands up to people and asserts her values and stuff. And it was really awesome. So I'm actually kicking around the idea of doing a Between Two Weirwoods panel so we can talk about Sansa, the character, because obviously we'll be doing mostly Sansa symbolism today. But that being said, I'm actually going to share my screen real quick because I have... Actually, there's another piece of Sanri art that I've featured in this essay, and that is, of course, the lovely Queen in the North image. Sanri, is this available as a print on your website, I believe?
Yeah, it is. It's a little 5x5, so it's a nice, like, little, like, you can frame it and hang it on your wall, or I have one on my desk. It's kind of cute.
Well, I like it a lot, and I gave it...
Yeah, it is. It's a little 5x5, so it's a nice, like, little, like, frame it and hang it on your wall.
Mr. Merry, I think your YouTube volume is up.
Kind of cute.
Well, I like it a lot, and I gave it... Mr. Merry, use the microphone.
Hold on.
Oh, man.
Madness. Mute. There's a little microphone button right on your on the Hangouts you need to hit. There we go. Wow. So then now what you need to do is you have the... Oh, you figured it out. Okay. Yeah, you have the YouTube page open of this stream, and it started feeding the audio back on a 5-second delay. That's what happened.
Yeah, what happened was I went to go... Well, anyway,
It's over now.
Yeah, I clicked over. I clicked open to a Twitter tab, and for some reason, the Twitter tab had the link to the video. And
oh man, that was a bum rush. That was a bum rush right there.
I'm really, really sorry.
Yeah, somebody labeled that moon meteorception. I think it was. We were inside of a live podcast streaming that it was a podcast or something.
The podcast locked inside the podcast.
You read about the podcast.
With my horrible voice echoing for ages. It brings the long
Mallory,
nights.
your voice is lovely as an angel. What are you talking about?
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. So, yes, am I still sharing? No, I'm not. Okay. So anyways, yes, that was a cool Queen in the North picture. And I did give it a place of prominence in the essay because it is so amazing.
Thank you.
But back to the essay. This isn't the first time we've talked about Sansa, of course. She played a starring role in Moons of Ice and Fire 3, Waves of Night and Moonblood, where she did amazing Nissa Nissa Fire Moon things at King's Landing. We won't recap all of that here, just a little bit. But I will say that my personal favorite scene has to be Sansa balling up her moonblood-soaked sheets and shoving them into the fire and filling the room with smoke at the same time that two Azor Ahai Reborn figures, Stannis and Tyrion, were burning things outside the castle and filling the sky with smoke. This entire scene and the ones connected to it all depict Sansa as a fire moon maiden with burning moon blood, culminating with the purple wedding, of course. Then she turns up in the mother of all ice moon symbols, the Eyrie, and, spoiler alert, we catch her doing some Night's Queen type of stuff. So you can see why it's important to trace out the path, from Nissa Nissa and fire moon symbolism to ice moon and Night's Queen symbolism. This series is about portals, after all, so we've got to figure out what's between and how she got from one to the other. So without further ado, let me say thanks to Maester Merry from the Up From Under Winterfell YouTube channel for performing the vocal readings from the text. Thanks to Sanrixian for live drawing the live podcast. Thanks to Stanley Black for our intro music, and of course the amazing John Walsh for our flamenco guitar music, which you'll hear in a second. Thanks to the man himself, George R.R. Martin, who has enriched all of our lives with his books. And thanks to all of you myth heads who have joined our Patreon. I'd actually like to take this moment to welcome the return of Sir Brian the Prodigal Stark, the good other, Knight of the Last House, wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Red Song, who has risen harder and stronger as one of the Long Night's Watch. He joins his fellow green zombie watchers, Sharon Ice Eyes, Dread Ferryman of the North, wielder of the Staff of the Gods, a weirwood staff banded in Valyrian steel. Sinxia, Frozen Fire Queen of the Summer Snows and Burner of Winter's Wick. Antonius the Conspirator, the Red Right Hand of R'hllor, Knower of the Unknowable, Dispenser of Final Justice. And Blue Raven of the Lightning Peck, the Frozen Thunderbolt, whose words are, "The way must be tried." So that makes 5 on the Zombie Watch. And I'm also proud to announce our 6th member, that's right, who is Visenya Ice Eyes, Starry Jewel Queen of the Frozen Vale of Tears. Very topic appropriate. And you'll notice that all of these half dead, half dozen have frozen fire type names, and that's not an accident, of course, because we're looking for a dozen valiant souls to give up their pretend internet lives for the greater good, to rise harder and stronger as zombie brothers and sisters of the Long Night's Watch, because Jon Snow's going to need some backup, am I right? So if you'd like to snag yourself a nickname, early access to the essay versions of the episodes, and most importantly, play a part in driving mythical astronomy onward and upward, then check out our Patreon campaign, which is linked at the top of lucifermeanslightbringer.com. And like I just said, that's also where you can find the matching text to this podcast. All right. So it's time for a section break. Sandra, you done drawing? I'm kidding.
No.
I'm kidding. That's just the intro. No, you're good. You're good. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit of a terrorist.
A little bit, he says.
I did let you out of the shame cube for this podcast, so hey.
That's true. Thank you. It was getting really rank in there.
It was. Well, we kept calling out, and we put in a window, an event. I hope you guys appreciate these modifications that I'm making. I mean, you know.
I do. I really do. Thank you.
This section is brought to you by the Patreon support of 4 of our most devout and loyal priests and priestesses of Starry Wisdom. Archmaester Emma, founder of the Maiden Maesters and keeper of the Two-Headed Sphinx. The Venus of Astgik, Starry Lady of the Dragonstones. The Orange Man. And Black-Eyed Lily, the Dark Phoenix. And this section is the self-titled Sansa Locked in Ice section. So I mentioned that Sansa's Moonblood scene in King's Landing is one of my favorites for symbolism and comedic effect. And by that, I don't mean to make light of it, as it is a very serious scene. It's an emotional matter for Sansa, as is everything that happens to her in King's Landing while she's being abused by the Lannisters on basically a daily basis. But there is something almost Three Stooges-like about how rapidly the scene goes from bad to worse to much worse, as Sansa starts out waking from a nightmare to realize she's experiencing her first menstruation, to then cutting out the blood stain in her sheets, to simply shoving the entire mattress into the fire in desperation. It's kind of funny in one sense, but at the same time, the desperation and obvious foolishness of trying to burn an entire mattress in a hearth fire underscores the extreme sense of terror and panic that Sansa feels at the thought of being forced to bear Joffrey's children against her will, which is obviously really terrifying. And of course, the symbolism here is absolutely bonkers. And that's, of course, the point I want to make. Sansa is clearly a Nissa Nissa fire moon figure, filling the air with smoke and burning her moon blood, and thinking about unpleasant couplings with Solar King Joffrey. That's really why this scene is my favorite, of course. It's the symbolism. If you want the full breakdown on this one, that can be found in the appropriately named Waves of Night and Moonblood episode. And hey, Sanri, by the way, can you mute your, actually both of you guys, can you mute your microphone when you are not talking? I'm getting a little desk noise. Cool, thanks. So at the same time, this more underrated bit of Sansa symbolism gives it a run for its money. It's especially clever because it's not even in a Sansa chapter. It's actually a great example of a sly writing technique that Martin uses to add more symbolism to a given scene, which is that he has other people talk about something elsewhere. So the following is the scene with Arya and Sandor at the Inn of the Crossroads, right before they get into a fight with Polliver and Raff the Sweetling and the Tickler. The mummers have just given Sandor the news that Joffrey was murdered at the Purple Wedding.
So much for my brave brothers of the Kingsguard. The Hound gave a snort of contempt. Who killed him? The impets thought him and his little wife. What wife? I forgot, you've been hiding under a rock. The northern girl, Winterfell's daughter. We heard she killed the king with a spell, and afterwards changed into a wolf with big leather wings like a bat, and flew out a tower window. But she left the dwarf behind, and Cersei means to have his head. That's stupid, Arya thought. Sansa only knows songs, not spells, and she'd never marry the imp. The Hound sat on the bench closest to the door. His mouth twitched, but only the burned side. She ought to dip him in wildfire and cook him, or tickle him till the moon turns black. He raised his wine cup and drained it straight away.
And now I have to unmute myself. All right. Thank you, Mary. What was that about the moon turning black? That was interesting. I did include that last bit about the moon turning black because, of course, it helps reinforce what's being symbolized here. Sansa, the Fire Moon Maiden, has symbolically changed into a winged bat wolf and flown out of a tower after the sun-darkening ceremony of the Purple Wedding. This is a picture of the Fire Moon turning into a moon meteor, with the winged bat wolf subbing in for a fire-breathing dragon, because that's more suited to Sansa's symbolism. My wonderful friends Isabel, Harper, and Sandra from the Twitteros would also like me to point out that Sansa's bat wings may reflect her Went heritage via her Tully mother. And for what it's worth, we know that Harrenhal, the seat of House Went, is entirely 100% symbolic of the destruction of the Fire Moon, which is what Sansa's doing or acting out right here as she turns into a Batwolf. So Harrenhal really actually is, I'd have to say, it's one of the most obvious, to be honest, as it's basically a huge hunk of scorched and cracked black stone that was burnt by a dragonfire. And we discussed some of Harrenhal's symbolism in Weirwood Goddess 2, It's an Arya Thing, as well as Moons of Ice and Fire 3, Visenya Draconis, if you're curious about that. Although there is more at Harrenhal that we are going to go back for in the future. Now, I'll also point out that the suggestion of Sansa leaping from the tower builds on both the general trope of maidens in the tower, which we see everywhere in A Song of Ice and Fire, such as Lyanna Stark, who died in a tower, and Ashara Dane, who supposedly threw herself from a tower. And it also builds on Sansa's own thoughts of suicide when she contemplated leaping from a King's Landing tower amidst the worst of Joffrey's abuse. But this time, in the colorful and rapidly spreading folktale of Sansa's escape from the Purple Wedding, it's a bit different. Instead of a suicidal leap from the tower, it's a flight and a transformation as she turns into a flying Batwolf. I probably don't have to tell you that Ashara Dane, who leapt from the tower, might not be dead either. As we know, she's living in the neck with her true love, Howland Reed, and going by the name Diana. Shout out to Chloe, aka the Queen of Love and Beauty. Or, sorry, Queen of Love and Butte, I should say. So, the Burning Moonblood. Yeah, no, you can get a yeah in for that.
Yeah, Chloe.
Woo! Drink. Hey, Grandpa. Dad, no. What are the other lines?
Dad, no. And
so, the Burning Moonblood. I guess I...
Sorry,
well, I've got the Sir Barristan grandfather voice saved for later, so we'll be breaking that out for y'all. Anyway, so the Burning Moonblood-soaked mattress and the legend of Batgirl Werewolf Sansa. Like I said, two of my favorite Sansa scenes at King's Landing. And don't worry, we are going to cover Dantos and his Morningstar melon in a bit. In a bit, get it? It's a Smashing Melon joke. Unfortunately for Dantos, the world is a vampire, and that was a Smashing Pumpkins joke. Anyway, those two scenes are, yeah, you can laugh at that. That's acceptable. Anyway, these two scenes are amusing, probably more amusing than my jokes, but by far the most important Fire Moon action that Sansa does at King's Landing is her part in the Purple Wedding. As we've discussed before, the Purple Wedding is a detailed description of the hiding of the face of the sun during the long night. According to theory, the sun was hidden by clouds of ash, smoke, and debris that came from the moon meteor impacts. Something which we can see as Nissa Nissa Moon having her revenge on her murderous husband, Azor Ahai, the Solar King. Sansa is playing the Nissa Nissa role here, with Joffrey playing the role of her abusive Solar King husband, even though technically he broke off the betrothal to Sansa to marry Marjorie. That's okay. Joffrey's murder has his bright solar face turning dark purple as he suffocates due to the effects of the poison known as the Strangler, and that, of course, was hidden in Sansa's symbolically redonkulous silver hairnet. Ergo, we can see this as just the sort of lunar revenge that I was speaking of, where an abused Nissa Nissa figure has her revenge on her abuser. The drama isn't always framed this way, but I have been suggesting that Nissa Nissa was an unwilling victim from the start, essentially, so it's interesting to see this very abusive and cruel version of the Solar King getting killed specifically for his cruelty, as the Tyrell's motivation to kill Joffrey was indeed to protect Marjorie from his abuse and maneuver her to marry Tommen instead, who was not an abuser and could be molded more to their liking. Now, as for that hairnet, it's what makes the mythical astronomy of the Purple Wedding uber clear. The poison known as the Strangler comes in the form of dark purple crystals, as we see in Maester Cressen's A Clash of Kings prologue chapter. And I assume that's why they used a black amethyst hairnet to disguise it, since black amethysts are also very dark purple. Oddly, both the leaf that the Strangler is made from and the black amethyst that it is disguised amongst are from Ashai, which can only make us think of dragons, fire magic, greasy black stone, Azor Ahai, and of course, the Amethyst Empress, who may have been Nissa Nissa herself. In fact, I'd say that Sansa... Hey, I thought I'd turn the sound off on my phone. Bad phone. That was my work phone, actually. I'm not working today. Thank you. Both the leaf from Ashai, Amethyst Empress. Yes, so the Strangler leaf being from Ashai and the Amethyst are from Ashai. That makes us think of all the Ashai things like the Amethyst Empress. And then we notice that in this very scene, Sansa is wearing the Amethyst from Ashai while acting out Nissa Nissa's revenge at Joffrey's wedding. And so I would take that as a strong piece of evidence that Nissa Nissa was the Amethyst Empress and that she comes from Ashai, which in turn implies that Ashai was indeed the capital of the Great Empire of the Dawn, as I suggested oh so long ago back in April of 2015. And I have added the receipts to the script. There's a hyperlink. Got receipts, y'all. It's also worth noting that those amethysts were, quote, so dark they drank the moonlight, which is a keyword phrase that we know well. That calls out to the greasy black stone of Ashai, which seems to drink the light, as well as Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper, whose dark steel also drinks the sun. And that's more ties to Ashai, dragons, and magic swords. And of course, moon meteor symbols. Of course, moon meteors. Those moon meteors drank the fire of the sun when the moon cracked open, which is what all of this light and sun drinking is about.
Drink.
Drink. Yeah, that was like 4 shots right there.
You're dead now.
You're dead now. Pow. Moon meteor storm. I cast moon meteors. So remember that just like Harrenhal or the Dragon Pit at King's Landing, a shy and the shadow that hangs over it are a model for the destroyed and blackened Fire Moon. That's where the poison that darkened the sun came from, essentially, the fallout of the breaking of the Fire Moon. And so this poison that kills Joffrey the Sun King comes from a shy, which is like a broken Fire Moon. Okay, you guys get it. So the hairnet itself has absolutely sparkling mythical astronomy symbolism, as Maester Merry will read for us.
It was a hairnet of fine spun silver, the strands so thin and delicate that the net seemed to weigh no more than a breath of air when Sansa took it in her fingers. Small gems were set wherever 2 strands crossed, so dark they drank the moonlight.
Drink the moonlight. Or alcohol.
That sounds very dangerous.
We definitely need a we need to make, you know what we should make instead of just the drinking game? We need to challenge ourselves. We should start making mythical astronomy cocktails.
We did that on Twitter.
Okay, well,
Let's pull it.
Oblivious, and we need
I
to keep
thought someone was going to say mythical astronomy bingo, and I was about to feel kind of like I was 80 years old.
I got the bingo over here.
But we can make up new ones. Melanie and I were doing it.
Yeah,
there's a green seer one.
Yeah, we need a light drinking moon meteor cocktail, or that's not a good name. I guess just it would be
Ice Moon Apocalypse.
Yeah, Ice Moon Apocalypse. Yeah, get to work on it, somebody. Bartenders, myth heads who are also bartenders, I hereby commission you. So these silver strands in the hairnet are essentially like the lattice of stars and galaxies, with the gems at the crossing points playing the role of stars. And I've caught Martin using this lattice word to refer to the cosmic net of stars a few times. And of course, these ideas originate in the Vedic mythology known as, or the bit of Vedic mythology known as Indra's net. This is a really cool thing. So let me quote Francis Cook's description of it from his 1977 book entitled Hua Yen Buddhism, The Jewel Net of Indra.
Far away in the heavenly abode of the great god Indra, there is a wonderful net, which has been hung by some cunning artificer in such a manner that it stretches out infinitely in all directions. In accordance with the extravagant tastes of the deities, the artificer has hung a single glittering jewel in each eye of the net. And since the net itself is infinite in its dimension, the jewels are infinite in number. There hang the jewels, glittering like stars in the first magnitude, a wonderful sight to behold. If we now arbitrarily select one of these jewels for inspection and look closely at it, we will discover that in its polished surface there are reflected all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel is also reflecting all the other jewels, so that there is an infinite reflecting process occurring.
That sounds pretty cool. You see why I wanted to read that one. That's just friggin' really awesome, just on its own merits. But of course, this is something that I think Sansa's hairnet is tying into really hard. So, you know, I always talk about how George's symbolism is fractal. And this idea of fractal universe is what Indra's net is essentially portraying. So just thought that was kind of a cool thing for George to tap into. But you can really see the specific callouts to Indra's net in Sansa's hairnet here, with the eye jewel stars at the crossing points of the lattice. Of course, stars are usually symbolized by diamonds because they're bright and glittery. So using a light drinking gem in the lattice instead simply implies the idea of dark stars, black hole moons, and that sort of thing. And that's not news to us. We've been saying that the exploding moon Sun conjunction effectively becomes a dark star since, let's see, I think it was Bloodstone Compendium number 2. Yes, in fact, the earlier version of that essay back on Westeros.org was called Black Hole Moon, for what it's worth. Yes. Hashtag
Can
Barbarian Boys.
Can we
Still-
sing that? Black hole moon, won't you tune?
Yeah, we definitely can.
Yes.
I've made copious Soundgarden references in that essay.
Yes.
Still, when a red-headed moon maiden wears an Indra's net full of dark stars, which poison and darken the solar king, that's essentially the basic mythical astronomy theory in action, and it's an awfully detailed version of it. It's kind of creating this idea that the very cosmic web of the universe is unraveling to kill the sun for his sin, which is a great way of seeing the long night, in my opinion. And also ties into the whole idea that it was Azor Ahai, the Prometheus character, who actually caused all of this. So the final layer of the hairnet symbolism comes from the ghost of High Heart when she sees a dream vision of Sansa at the Purple Wedding.
I dreamt of a maid at a feast with purple serpents in her hair, venom dripping from their fangs, and later I dreamt that maid again, slaying a savage giant in a castle built of snow.
The Moon Maiden has a nest of poisonous snakes in her kissed by fire hair, and we know what that means. Fiery moon dragons. Yes, dark stars coming out of the cosmic web to rain on your parade. We've seen a lot of poison, snakebite, and toxic symbolism applied to the meteor symbols. Think of the oily black stone of Yin in Ashai, which seems to be cursed, or Oberyn's sun-tipped spear, or Oberyn's sun spear, which was tipped with oily black poison. All in all, Sansa's starry Medusa hairnet is some of the most detailed mythical astronomy found anywhere, and it squarely pegs Sansa as a fire moon, Nissa Nissa person at King's Landing, as she helps kill the sun. Kind of is what it is. And look, the ghost of High Heart is speaking of Sansa in a castle made of snow. Why, that must be an allusion to the Eyrie, of course, and to her snow castle scene there, with Peter as the giant. And it's generally taken as foreshadowing of Sansa serving up Peter some well-deserved and long-awaited Stark justice. It's basically the mythical astronomy story of Sansa's transition from King's Landing to the Eyrie also. First, she's a maid at a feast with purple serpents in her hair, venom dripping from their fangs, and later, she's slaying a savage giant in a castle built of snow. Now, I've mentioned this before, and it's really simple to understand with everything that we've learned already. At least I hope it is. So to put it simply, Sansa is basically the female version of the dragon locked in ice. She starts out as a fire moon, Nissa Nissa person, then does a ton of moon combustion and moon blood stuff at King's Landing, kills the Sun King, and then flies away and turns into a stone, a Lane Stone. The name change works on a lot of levels and conveys the idea that Sansa is transforming as she leaves King's Landing and goes to the Vale, only she's turning into a stone instead of a werewolf Batgirl this time. She's transforming into a stone, guys. A moon meteor stone, it would be, as Sansa represents the transition from a whole, intact fire moon into a flying fire moon meteor dragon. She darkens her hair to chestnut brown, but once she refers to it as Elaine's burnt brown, which works together with her stone moniker to imply her as a former piece of burnt fire moon, a burnt stone. The fiery moon meteor lands then, or I should say that then the fiery moon meteor lands inside an ice moon symbol, which is the Vale, just as the dragon locked in ice meteor always does. And presto, it's a Sansa locked in ice.
Old snow cloaked the courtyard, and icicles hung down like crystal spears from the terraces and towers. The Eyrie was built of fine white stone, and winter's mantle made it whiter still. So beautiful, Elaine thought. So impregnable. She could not love this place, no matter how she tried. Even before the guards and the serving men had made their descent, the castle had seemed as empty as a tomb, and more so when Peter Baelish was away. No one sang up there, not since Marillion. No one ever laughed too loud. Even the gods were silent. The Eyrie boasted a sept, but no septon, a god's wood, but no heart tree. No prayers are answered here, she often thought, though some days she felt so lonely she had to try. Only the wind answered her, sighing endlessly around the 7 slim white towers and rattling the moon door every time it gusted. It will be even worse in winter, she knew. This winter will In winter, this will be a cold, white prison.
Dun dun dun. That was from A Feast for Crows, and as you can see, the Eyrie has the standard prison symbolism of all Ice Moon locations, such as White Harbor with its wolf's den, Winterfell with its crypts, and its labyrinth and prison symbolism, and of course the Wall with its cold ice cells, and the idea of the Night's Watch as kind of prisoners at the Wall, which they are. The Eyrie also has those ice cells, of course, and they are put to good use as well. And to the same effect, you probably also noticed the Eyrie seeming as empty as a tomb. It's a tomb for the Fire Moon Meteor, whether that be incarnated as a dark Azor Ahai reborn person like Jon, or a transformed Nissa Nissa figure like Sansa here. Marillion and Tyrion, both of whom come to the Eyrie, show us male Azor Ahai figures getting locked in the icy prison tomb of the Eyrie. They're both put in the sky cells, if you recall, where the bloody blue calls to them. And the general astronomy is the same, whether it's male or female. It's a piece of Fire Moon being locked in the ice. In terms of the Eyrie having no gods and being empty, well, when it gets filled up, it gets filled with a dead goddess, the dead Fire Moon goddess, so to speak. Sansa isn't exactly, she isn't actually dead, of course, but in a way, she is, because she temporarily kills her Sansa Stark identity and becomes Elaine Stone, quote, inside and out, as she repeats to herself several times. And then there's this line, which comes as Sansa is sailing to the Fingers on the way to the Vale.
The wind ran salty fingers through her hair, and Sansa shivered. Even this close to shore, the rolling of the ship made her tummy queasy. She desperately needed a bath and a change of clothes. I must look as haggard as a corpse and smell of vomit. Lord Peter came up beside her, cheerful as ever. Good morrow. The salt air is bracing, don't you think? It always sharpens my appetite. He put a sympathetic arm around her shoulders. Are you quite well? You look so pale.
First of all, fuck Peter, the smarmy little peckerwood. Secondly,
Yeah, like, what was that about?
I mean, what a dick, you know? He's like, oh, it's bracing, isn't it? Yeah, it just sharpens my appetite. Oh, you look like you're gonna hurl there.
I'm gonna eat some clams in front of you. Or something disgusting, equally.
He's just being the worst. He's being the worst.
He is the worst. So, in any case,
Sansa.
Sansa. Oh no, we can keep ripping on Peter as long as you want.
I just wanted to say, get a job for Chloe.
Yeah, there you go. He definitely needs to get a fucking job.
Yeah.
So, second of all, Sansa is a pale corpse here. That was the point. She's a Fire Moon turned to a stone, a symbolically slain moon goddess, and she's headed for an icy prison tomb. And she's a corpse. If you're thinking of the proper name for Night's Queen, which is the Corpse Queen, then you're very smart. Good job. Sansa will indeed be performing Night's Queen symbolism at the Eyrie, as I mentioned. And Elaine is actually an Ice Queen name too. It's similar to Alanis Harloff, Theon's mother, who has both corpse symbolism and Night's Queen symbolism, as well as Alysanne Targaryen, whom we established as an Ice Queen figure in the last episode, or actually 2 episodes ago. Ice Moon Apocalypse. And Elaine is also just kind of a flip-flop of the syllables in Lyanna. Lane, Lee, Anna. So there you go. And as someone on Westeros.org pointed out oh so long ago, Arya takes up the name Cat in Braavos, while Sansa becomes Elaine. And if you combine Arya and Sansa's fake names, you get Cat Elaine, which is like Catelyn. It's wordplay. So, Elaine is an Ice Moon Queen name, and it combined with Stone, Sansa's new name, Elaine Stone, effectively translates to Ice Moon Meteor Queen. And as I said, she does indeed do Night's Queen stuff in a few scenes while at the Eyrie. I should really stop saying "as I said" so much. It's one of those crutches. It's like so hard not to use that, but I'm constantly referring to stuff that I've said previously. And yeah, I don't know. That's definitely not on the drinking game list. Anyways, she does indeed do Night's Queen stuff. So this is highly suggestive, guys. It implies that Nissa Nissa, after being killed by Azor Ahai, somehow became the Night King's Corpse Queen, whom we call Night's Queen. Now, that's a huge and exciting topic, and we're going to be delving into that more as we go along. But I wanted to introduce it here because it's basically one of these central messages that emerges when you study the symbolism of Sansa at the Eyrie. She's unquestionably a Fire Moon Queen in King's Landing, doing Nissa Nissa things, And then she turns into a Night's Queen figure when she goes to the Ice Moon place, the Eyrie. And if Night's King was Azor Ahai himself, as I've been suggesting, then this might become a weird story about Azor Ahai perhaps trying to raise his lost Nissa Nissa from the dead, or perhaps Nissa Nissa finding a way to escape death and return to Azor Ahai, or something else very dark and strange like that. So, tinfoil away, folks. Yes. Since making this discovery, I have noticed that there are many other Nissa Nissa Fire Moon Maidens who turn into icy Night's Queen figures, or at least there's a couple. Or said another way, that some Fire Moon people become locked in the ice and turn icy. That's really all that means. Now, they don't all do that, and I assume that's because not all the Fire Moon meteors landed in the Ice Moon. Some of them hit the Earth and the ocean and stuff like that. But some of those moon meteors do hit the ice. And so, for example, we see Cersei being imprisoned in an Ice Moon place, which is the Sept of Baelor. And that is the same thing as Sansa going to the Eyrie. That's literally a Fire Moon Queen being locked in an Ice Moon prison. So there it is. Sansa, however, is where I first noticed the pattern. And so we're going to talk about some of those other characters in due time. But for now, we're basically just laying out the broad strokes of Sansa's arc so we can dive into her chapters at the Eyrie and know what to look for. So there are 2 chapters leading up to her arrival at the Eyrie. At first, I thought I would be able to cover both of those chapters in like one little section on the way to the Snow Castle chapter, but oh no. These 2 chapters are, of course, loaded with symbolism. And by the time I was finished analyzing them and writing about them and trimming away whatever I could, the episode was pretty much done. Part of that is just because a lot happens in those chapters, and part of it is that Sansa has some really cool references to external world mythology, and several of them are touched on in these chapters. So there we go. Oh, and I've left the camera on Maester Merry that entire last 5 minutes or so. Hope you weren't picking your nose, Maester Merry.
That's exactly what I said in the chat.
No one's complaining, so
that's cool. Yeah, no, definitely not.
Oh, please instead next time lock the camera on Sanri's drawing because it's pretty bad.
Well, it is time to take a look at Sanri's drawing. Actually, we are at the section break. So Sanri, why don't you zoom out and wow,
this is how far we've made it.
Oh, this is gorgeous.
So I want to make it like more cosmic over in this corner.
Okay.
And kind of
some stars shining in the dark parts, maybe.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And maybe some shiny snake eyes or something. We'll get there. But yeah.
Nice, dude. Yeah, Aziz likes it.
Oh, Aziz is here. Hey, Aziz.
In the chat, Disputed Lands likes it. Stephen Stark, by the way, was the first one to use the mythical astronomy at paypal.me and send me a donation. Thank you, Stephen Stark.
Hey, Stephen.
You're my rock, dude. You're amazing. And if any of you else want to send in what we would normally call a super chat, you can simply load mythical astronomy at paypal.me in your browser address bar and make an easy donation to mythical astronomy. Or you can sign up for our Patreon account. That would be awesome too.
And please laugh the entire time you realize that YouTube is actually losing money every time you do this.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Screw YouTube.
Have
right
yourself
now.
A cackle. Have yourself a merry little cackle. That was from Mary.
That was wonderful.
I appreciate it. I like it that everything I do is Mary.
Yeah, well, I found a Mary quote.
Oh, yes. I know. It's not at all creepy. It's not at all creepy.
It's a good one. It's a very good one. Okay. It's time for some honoring of the Patreon names and flamenco guitar. Escape from King's Landing. This section is sponsored by 3 of our newest patrons. Han Never Solo, the Scorpion Mind, Cyber Pincher of the Weirwood Net, and Guardian of the Celestial Stallion and the Horned Lord. Durin Durandin, the Redfish Bluefish, earthly avatar of Heavenly House Pisces, whose eyes are ruby and sapphire, and whose sword is pale fire. And Westeros of the Cosmic Mill, the Unchained Uncle, host of bards, and priest of the Sacred Order of the Black Hand. There we go. And guys, once more, I will say that you do not actually need to have a PayPal account to use paypal.me. All you need to do is literally put this in your address bar, mythicalastronomy@paypal.me, and you go there, and there's just a little thing you can pay with a card or anything at all. So you actually don't even need PayPal. That is why it is so fun and easy and handy and profitable for me. All right. So there were some new Patreon names, and of course you might recognize Westeros of the Cosmic Mill, the Unchained Uncle, as Unchained, or Ross Miller on Twitter, one of our Twitteros crew. And as I mentioned, Durndon is one of my oldest friends from Westeros.org, who collaborated strongly on the whole Great Empire of the Dawn theory. He's the one that spotted the ghosts with swords of pale fire and Valyrian hair in Dany's dream and connected that to the gemstones of the Great Empire of the Dawn, which was basically one of the biggest discoveries in that whole theory. So thanks, Dern, my homie. All right. And the first patron, Han Never Solo, the Scorpion Mind, has been waiting for his name for a while and elected to hear it live instead of me spoiling the surprise. So I hope you liked it. Can you pay with Bitcoin? You might be able to. I'm not sure. Why don't you try it? Find out. Let me know. Probably not. But in any case. So to prepare for this episode. Oh, and Bernie, I see your message there. I will check on that. Thank you. So to prepare for this episode, I've been rereading or re-listening as it happens. Rest in peace, Roy Dotrice. To all the chapters that take place at the Vale and those that lead into them. And I think that's actually going to work well as a way to tackle Sansa's Vale chapters chronologically, just as I read them, as they do seem to form a cohesive, overarching narrative. Sorry, cough button. So we'll start with Sansa's first A Storm of Swords, King's Landing chapter after the Purple Wedding, which begins with her on the way to meet Dantos in the God's Wood and make her escape. The entire chapter is basically all about transformation. Sansa's transformation, and more importantly, Nissa Nissa's. Sansa is fleeing the Red Keep. She arrives in the God's Wood, and then she pulls out a hidden change of clothes from the bole of an oak. She thinks back to the Purple Wedding itself and the flight from the scene of Joffrey's death, and we get some great Nissa Nissa, agony, and ecstasy language.
The sight of it had been too terrible to watch, and she had turned and fled, sobbing. Lady Tanda had been fleeing as well. "You have a good heart, my lady," she said to Sansa. "Not every maid would weep so for a man who had her set aside and wed to a dwarf." "A good heart. I have a good heart." Hysterical laughter rose up in her gullet, but Sansa choked it back down. The bells were ringing, slow and mournful. Ringing, ringing, ringing. They had rung for King Robert in the same way. Joffrey was dead, he was dead, he was dead, dead, dead. Why was she crying when she wanted to dance? Were they tears of joy?
So, laughing and weeping, crying and dancing. And who has a better heart than Nissa Nissa, of course, she who tempered the red sword of heroes in her own heart. The idea of crying Nissa Nissa is followed up on a couple of pages later, as it says,
"I could never abide the weeping of women," Joff once said, but his mother was the only woman weeping now.
Now, Cersei is another Fire Moon figure, and her tears would accordingly be Fire Moon meteor symbols. Cersei's Widow's Wail here is a mirror of Joffrey's sword, Widow's Wail, an obvious Fire Moon meteor symbol, and a Lightbringer symbol, just like Cersei's tears. So, once we get to the Eyrie, we'll see Moon Maiden tears serving as Ice Moon symbols, of course, but here in King's Landing, this is a fiery affair. And I think it's pretty cool. It's like Cersei's wail itself is a call out to Widow's Wail, and that's a Fire Moon thing, and her tears are also Fire Moon too. So it's you just see the Fire Moon Maiden just like weeping swords, basically. And that is the idea. So then we get a terrific set of moon darkening metaphors.
"Dress warmly," Sir Dantos had told her, "and dress dark." She had no black, so she chose a dress of thick brown wool. The bodice was decorated with freshwater pearls, though. The cloak will cover them. The cloak was a deep green with a large hood. She slipped the dress over her head and donned the cloak. though she left the hood down for a moment. There were shoes as well, simple and sturdy with flat heels and square toes. The gods heard my prayer, she thought. She felt so numb and dreamy. My skin has turned to porcelain, to ivory, to steel. Her hands moved swiftly, awkwardly, as if they had never let down her hair before.
Okay, there's lots going on here. Pearls are basically always moon symbols, and these pearls are getting covered by a dark cloak. That dark green cloak is actually the formerly white one that Sandor gave her, his Kingsguard white cloak, actually. It was stained with blood, so Sansa, never one to waste good wool, yeah, that's it, kept it and dyed it dark green, which means it already has moon darkening symbolism, and then here it is covering up Sansa's moon pearls. Sansa herself is dressing dark, which implies Sansa as a darkened moon maiden. She's also turning to porcelain and ivory and then to steel, which complements the idea of her turning into a stone. It also mirrors all the sword tempering language at Dany's alchemical wedding and in her matching dragon dreams, where she was being tempered by the fire. And this implies basically the same thing, that Sansa and Dany are both fire moon maidens who depict the moon turning into sword-like meteor stones, from which actual magic swords can't even be made. So accompanied by Dantos, Sansa leaves the Godswood, descends the Serpentine steps, and then passes through quite a bit of hellish netherworld imagery. This builds on the feeling that Sansa has of being in a dreamlike state that we saw in the last passage, and although I didn't actually pull the quote, this idea was introduced in the very beginning of the chapter, where the second sentence was, Sansa felt as though she were in a dream. And that's the whole deal with this whole portal in-between journey that she's doing. It's a dreamlike experience. So what kind of dream is it? Well, this is dead Nissa Nissa we're talking about, so it would have to be a dragon dream.
They continued down the Serpentine and across a small sunken courtyard. Sir Dantos shoved open a heavy door and lit a taper. They were inside a long gallery. Along the walls stood empty suits of armor, dark and dusty, their helms crested with roses' scales that continued down their backs. As they hurried past, the taper's light made the shadows of each scale stretch and twist. The Hollow Knights are turning into dragons, she thought.
Cool. Descending the Serpentine steps is certainly suggestive of a descent into hell. Shout out to Painkiller Jane of the Twitteros, who's in the chat. And indeed, below, Sansa finds empty suits of armor and Hollow Knights turning into dragons. I guess the empty suits of armor are the Hollow Knights turning into dragons, I meant to say. So this is fairly obvious moon meteor talk, of course, but I think it's primarily an important green zombies clue. Think about it. In the Weirwood Goddess series, I think I pretty well established that Nissa Nissa has some sort of very strong connection to the Weirwood trees, and that she seems to go into the Weirwood net when she dies, or perhaps even she helps create the Weirwood net, or maybe modify it so that mankind can access it, something along those lines. But here we have Sansa flying from the scene of the death of the sun and then using the Godswood as an escape route while in a dreamlike state. She's dreaming in the Godswood, people, and using the Godswood and then the Serpentine steps as a kind of portal or door to the underworld. So think of all the Weirwood doors and gates that we've seen, some of which are at the Eyrie. There's even a famous one under the wall, which we'll talk about in the future, to have no fear. Now recall also that Sansa pulls a dark green cloak out of the bole of an oak, almost as if she's pulling the dark green right out of the wood itself and wearing it. It's another way of depicting her as entering the trees, and don't forget that she's combining the green cloak with a dark brown dress, so very earthy. Then after meeting her psychopomp fool character, whom we'll speak of in a moment, Sansa immediately descends the Serpentine steps to the dragon underworld. Repeat, Nissa Nissa dies and then uses the Weirwoods as a door to enter some sort of dragon-like afterlife or underworld. And gosh, haven't we seen this show before? Here again, I'm drawing upon the Weirwood Goddess material, where we saw that Cat, playing the Nissa Nissa role, symbolically goes into the Weirwood net by attaining the Weirwood stigmata at the Red Wedding. And she was also guided along by a fool, Jingle Bell, just as Sansa is guided by Dantos. Catelyn's next stop is a sort of dragon weirwood underworld place, the Hollow Hill, formerly inhabited by Beric, the Flaming Sword hero, who passed on his flame of life to wake Cat as Lady Stoneheart. The weirwood cave symbolism, of course, is explicit, and the dragon symbolism comes by way of Beric's many parallels to Bloodraven, Jon Snow, Azor Ahai, and the Night's Watch, which we've talked about endlessly. I've said before that Cat represents the ghost of Nissa Nissa, or at least Stoneheart anyways, when she exists inside the weirwood net. It's very similar to the white-haired and red-eyed ghost of Highheart, haunting the circle of weirwood stumps atop the hill whose name she bears. These are weirwood ghost figures haunting the weirwood net. And playing the part of Lady Stoneheart's Green Zombie Night's Watchmen are, of course, the Brotherhood Without Banners, who are called the Knights of the Hollow Hill. Hollow Hill, Hollow Hill. Wasn't there just a line about Hollow Knights turning into dragons in Sansa's underworld scene? Indeed. These are entirely matching scenes, with Sansa's Hollow Dragon Knights doing the same thing that Stoneheart's Knights of the Hollow Hill do. They're playing the role of green zombies. Those zombies are hollow shells until they are raised, because they're corpses. And that's exactly what's happening with Sansa beneath the Red Keep. Sansa is symbolically raising the Hollow Knights from the dead by walking past with a light that makes their shadows move. This is also comparable to another Fire Queen Nissa Nissa figure, Melisandre, when she goes beneath Storm's End to birth a shadow baby in a cave. The cave mouth and the white rock face, and a couple of other things gave that cave weirwood symbolism. And Melisandre is, of course, playing the weirwood goddess figure and animating a black shadow, just as Sansa does beneath the Red Keep. As we've seen many times, the Shadow Babies and the Black Brothers of the Night's Watch have heavily overlapping symbolism. So these are all the same story. In totality, what I see happening here is Sansa playing the role of the Fire Moon Maiden, whom we also know as the Weirwood Goddess, dying and descending into the underworld where she is able to raise dragons from the dead. These are the first Night's Watch zombies, whom we already know have dragon and shadow symbolism. The parallels to her mother in her Lady Stoneheart form, as well as to Melisandre, really make the symbolism pop here and say, if Sansa becomes Elaine Stone in her heart, as Peter tells her she must, wouldn't Sansa be a Stoneheart too? The next paragraph in Sansa's Escape from King's Landing chapter gives us more grade to netherworld imagery.
One more stair took them to an oaken door banded with iron. Be strong now, my jonquil. You are almost there. When Dantos lifted the bar and pulled open the door, Sansa felt a cold breeze on her face. She passed through 12 feet of wall, and then she was outside the castle, standing at the top of a cliff. Below was the river, above the sky, and one was as black as the other.
Oh boy. We've got comparing the sky to a sea or a river. This is something that jumps off the page for us mythical astronomers. Now, we modern humans use the term spaceship because space has always been conceived of as a kind of black cosmic ocean. This cosmic ocean idea often serves as a metaphor for the netherworld, something that we've touched on before in other essays. So compare this scene to one of Dany's visions from the House of the Undying from A Clash of Kings.
Her silver was trotting through the grass to a darkling stream beneath a sea of stars.
A dark stream wandering through the Dothraki Sea and a sea of stars above. This is actually a match to Dany's Wake the Dragon dream from A Game of Thrones, where she again plays up the Dothraki Sea idea with rippling water language.
She saw sunlight on the Dothraki Sea, the living plain rich with the smells of earth and death. Wind stirred the grasses and they rippled like water. Drogo held her in strong arms, and his hand stroked her sex and opened her, and woke that sweet wetness that was his alone. And the stars smiled down on them, stars in a daylight sky. Home, she whispered, as he entered her and filled her with his seed. But suddenly the stars were gone, and across the blue sky swept the great wings and took the world aflame. I really can't believe I didn't giggle. It was like really quite difficult not to giggle.
I was muted the entire time, man. I'm horrible.
So this is a classic scene here. The sun and moon copulate, then the dragons take wing, the world takes flame, and the stars are hidden. It's very standard stuff. The waves of night and moonblood have been let loose. And that's what's going on in Sansa's scene too. She's just let loose all kinds of darkness and moonblood at the Red Wedding, and now she's entering that dark, starless stream. Once out on the water, Sansa remarks to herself that, quote, they had the dark river all to themselves, just like Dany in the Dothraki Sea after the lights go out. Fortunately, they have a handy guide through this dark sea. The Merlin King. Who else, right? Well, before we get to that, Sansa has to climb down the cliff face, and we see her beginning to turn cold.
Sansa dared not look down. She kept her eyes on the face of the cliff, making certain each step before reaching for the next. The stone was rough and cold. Sometimes she could feel her fingers slipping, and the handholds were not as evenly spaced as she would have liked. The bells would not stop ringing. Before she was halfway down, her arms were trembling, and she knew that she was going to fall. One more step, she told herself. One more step. She had to keep moving. If she stopped, she would never start again, and dawn would find her still clinging to the cliff, frozen in fear. One more step, and one more step. The ground took her by surprise. She stumbled and fell, her heart pounding. When she rolled onto her back and stared up from where she had come, her head swam dizzily and her fingers clawed at the dirt.
Okay, we're getting so much love for Sanri's picture here that I'm going to put it back on the screen for just a moment, Sanri. Looks really great. Disputed Land says she's getting emotional just looking at it.
Oh, Amanda.
And Niana the Wise seconds the motion. So, yep. People are requesting this one as a print.
Oh, yeah. I'll get there.
Yeah, it would be great. This is gorgeous.
Thank you. I know I was supposed to draw other scenes, but I got really into this one.
Well, I like how you're putting the stars in the eyes of the snakes. That really works for me.
Yeah.
Just make the stars black on the right side, I guess, right?
Right.
That's cool, man.
Wow. We'll get there.
I love you, Sanrixian.
Oh, I love you too, Lucy.
That is the whole fandom. It's great. Anyway, so let's see, where were we? We just finished Merry reading that quote where Sansa's climbing down the cliff face. Perfect. Okay, so first, it's just the stone that's cold, but then Sansa Stark is turning into Elaine Stone too, so she imagines herself frozen to the cliff when the dawn comes. Hello, dawn equals original Ice of House Stark theory? Heck, the idea of Dawn finding Nissa Nissa frozen almost sounds like Dawn as Lightbringer stabbing Nissa Nissa and taking all her fire and warmth and leaving her frozen. Or perhaps some sort of icy analog to that story involving Night's Queen. We'll speculate on that some other time. But then we have falling Moon Maiden language as the ground takes her by surprise and she stumbles and falls, with her heart of a fallen star pounding as she hits. Her head swims dizzily, implying the severed head moon meteor symbol and the idea of a moon or moon meteor drowning, a la the sea dragon and the drowned goddess ideas. Remember, she's about to have the dark river to herself. So think also of Dany immersing herself in the black waters of the womb of the world as the reflection of the moon seems to swim on the lake with her. It's basically the same symbolism as Sansa descending into the black river of darkness here. These are moon maidens entering the dark ocean or dark river. Right before Dany did that, immersing herself in the womb of the world, that is, she manifested incredible weirwood stigmata symbolism when she eats the horse heart, which gives her the bloody mouth and hands. And this strongly implies Dany as a Nissa Nissa weirwood goddess figure entering the weirwood net, just as Sansa goes through the godswood during escape. And yes, I'm definitely holding out on you guys big time by summarizing that Dany weirwood stigmata thing in just one sentence. But don't worry. We will have a full episode on Dany's strange and abundant Green Seer symbolism coming soon in this very series. It's going to be part of the Ravenous Reader Green Sea material, which I'm sure some of you guys can already see seeping in the edges here in this episode. In any case, so for now, I just want to point out the pattern of entering the weirwood net symbolism being followed by entering the dark river, sea, pond, or lake symbolism. Heck, even Kat's body is thrown into the green fork of the trident after she is killed at the Red Wedding, before she winds up inside her weirwood cave with a bunch of fire worshippers. So next up, after Oswell rows them past all the drowned and broken ships that were destroyed during the Battle of the Blackwater, which sort of emphasizes, again, this whole underworld, afterlife state of everything here, then we catch sight of the Merlin King.
The eastern sky was vague with the first hint of dawn, when Sansa finally saw a ghostly shape in the darkness ahead. A trading galley, her sails furled and moving slowly on a bank of oars. As they drew closer, she saw the ship's figurehead, a merman with a golden crown blowing a great seashell horn.
Well, it's a ghost ship. And of course, a ghost ship is a perfect psychopomp symbol to ferry our Moon Maiden across the river Styx, if you will, to her new home on Ice Moon World. Pay no attention to the great seashell horn he's blowing. I'm sure that has nothing to do with magical horns or waking the sleepers or anything like that. Actually, it's a perfect call out to another Nissa Nissa Moon Maiden being given a weirwood-like death transformation scene while backed up to a tree. It's also one of my favorites, so let's quote it.
And then her back came up hard against a tree, and she could dance no more. The wolf raised the axe above his head to split her head in two. Asha tried to slip to her right, but her feet were tangled in some roots, trapping her. She twisted, lost her footing, and the axe head crunched against her temple with a scream of steel on steel. The world went red and black and red again. Pain crackled up her leg like lightning, and far away she heard the Northman say, "You bloody cunt," as he lifted his axe up for the blow that would finish her. A trumpet blew. That's wrong, she thought. There are no trumpets in the drowned god's watery halls. Below the waves, the Merlings hail their lord by blowing into seashells. She dreamt of red hearts burning and a black stag in a golden wood with a flame streaming from his antlers.
I'm muted. There we go. Wowee, the Nissa weirwood symbolism. Blah, 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 blah. What I was trying to say was, boy, howdy. The Nissa weirwood goddess symbolism sure is strong here. Asha is backed up against a tree like a weirwood sacrifice. She's even tangled in the roots. Then she's struck a lightning-like blow that makes the world go red and black and red again. And here we are, of course, supposed to think of the storm god's thunderbolts setting the tree ablaze, which brings the fire of the gods to man. Then, just like Sansa dreaming in the gods would during her transformation, Asha dreams after her weirwood sacrifice routine and sees Azor Ahai himself, the fiery black stag in the golden wood. Then, just as Sansa follows up her transformation in the gods wood by entering the dark river and catching sight of the Merlin King and his seashell horn, Asha thinks of Merlings and the seashell horns and the drowned god's watery halls. That's a pretty damn tight fucking correlation now, isn't it? Good stuff. So the message here is very clear, I think, at least the basics of it. Nissa dies. She enters the weirwood net, and that seems to act as a portal to various types of underworld places, either a dark dungeon with hollow dragon knights or a hollow hill with fire worshipping knights on one hand, or a dark river or stream or lake or sea. And frequently we get both. So there's a strong implication that this is not the end point of the journey, however. And this is definitely true for Sansa. She's headed to the Ice Moon place known as the Eyrie, which is where she seems to diverge from her mother's Nissa arc, aka Stoneheart, because Stoneheart is still down in her warm and toasty R'hllor cave, running on fire magic, and is not locked in the ice. That could always change in the future, of course. More on this to come. Sansa, however, only briefly passes through the Godswood and the Dragon Underworld before she's onto the Dark River and the Merlin King on the way to the Eyrie. After Sansa is safely aboard the Merlin King, shivering though she is, it's time to reward the fool version of Azor Ahai for offering up his wife in sacrifice. That's right, I'm talking about Dantos. Dantos the Red, that is. The Red Side of Heroes. This is a bit of a side branch, but a necessary one. Of course, you'll remember that Peter Baelish double-crosses Dantos in front of Sansa and then promptly murders him as soon as Sansa is aboard. And that scene is actually going to be a parallel to the Red Wedding, where another Azor Ahai Fool figure, Aegon Frey, aka Jingle Bell, was executed at the same time that another Fire Moon Weirwood Goddess figure, Cat, symbolically enters the Weirwood Net. That's right, it's another Sansa Cat parallel, and there are plenty more to come. As for Dantos the Fool as Azor Ahai, As for Dantos the Fool as Azor Ahai, it's not too confusing as long as you remember that more than one person can play the same archetypal role. So just because Joffrey is Sansa's dying Solar King at the Red Wedding doesn't mean that Dantos can't also play an Azor Ahai role for Sansa here, because it kind of goes scene by scene. And harken back to the scene in King's Landing where if we harken back to the scene in King's Landing where Dantos tries to shield Sansa from the Kingsguard abuse, we can see that the symbolism of Dantos is actually very easy to recognize.
Let me beat her, Dantos shoved forward, tin armor clattering. He was armed with a morning star whose head was a melon. My Florian. She could have kissed him, blotchy skin and broken veins and all. He trotted his broomstick around her, shouting, "Traitor, traitor!" and whacking her over the head with the melon. Sansa covered herself with her hands, staggering every time fruit pounded her, her hair sticky by the second blow. People were laughing. The melon flew to pieces. "Laugh, Joffrey," she prayed as the juice ran down her face and the front of her blue silk gown. "Laugh and be satisfied."
So here's Dantos the Red hitting Sansa with a morning star at Joffrey's request. It's actually as if Dantos is the comet here, wielded against the Fire Moon by the Solar King Joffrey. And that's actually something that we've seen before. Sometimes a solar figure holding a sword represents both the sun and the comet, like Azor Ahai with Lightbringer. But other times, the sun and the comet are the king, and then someone else acting as the king's sword. The latter scenario is what's happening here. You've got to admit that the Melon Morningstar is a real prize winner. And that's another Melon joke, by the way. It's actually a lot like when Catspaw Assassin attacked Catelyn, but that was really... Oh, man, I'm sorry. I'm getting all... When I make these jokes, I amuse myself, and then I lose my place. Sorry. It's actually a lot like when the Catspaw Assassin attacked Catelyn, because he was really acting as a cat's paw of Joffrey. And there, too, we saw the cat's paw as the comet being wielded by the Solar King. And then later on, after Dantos' death, Peter calls Dantos his cat's paw, which then creates another parallel between Sansa and Cat, because Cat was given Weirwood Stigmata by the cat's paw assassin at Winterfell, and Sansa was given Weirwood Stigmata by the cat's paw Dantos' Morningstar Melon. In any case, we have seen before that there is indeed one version of Azor Ahai who seems to be a sacrificed fool. And I believe that this implies Azor Ahai foolishly seeking after the fire of the gods, essentially. He sacrificed his Moon Maiden wife, as well as the actual Fire Moon, to do so, and then reaped the consequences, which included his death. Another way I've said this is that Azor Ahai kills Nissa Nissa to create an entrance or a portal into the Weirwood Net, and then enters himself, which he does by being sacrificed to the tree. So just as with the mythical astronomy story, both the sun and the moon seem to die in some sort of chain reaction event. Now you'll notice that Sansa thinks of Dantos as her Florian, which implies them as man and wife, and therefore makes the metaphor even better. Sansa is literally thinking, my Florian, right as Dantos hits her with the Morning Star, which really gives us which actually gives us a willingness in this sacrifice scenario that stands in very stark contrast to the abusive Azor Ahai Nissa Nissa relationship depicted by Joffrey and Sansa, or Peter and Sansa. So, just thought I would point that out. Dantos is a fool, of course, just like Jingle Bell, and Martin even uses the ringing of the city bells as Dantos first appears to Sansa in the Godswood to enhance the fool vibe of Dantos.
She heard a faint rustle of leaves and stuffed the silver hairnet down deep in the pocket of her cloak. "Who's there?" she cried. "Who is it?" The Godswood was dim and dark, and the bells were bringing Joff into his grave. "Me!" He staggered out from under the trees, reeling drunk. He caught her arm to steady himself. Sweet Jonquil, I've come. Your Florian has come. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid, Sansa.
Yes, Florian is come. He's here. Now give me a kiss.
A big old smack on the lips.
Just imagine how comforting that must have been, right? The drunk man has come to save you.
Oh, thank goodness.
I really like the psychology of Sansa. When she first meets Don, she's trying to process it. She gets this note like, "Oh, we're gonna rescue you," and then she's like, "Wait, it's this drunk guy." And then she eventually feels sorry for him, and she's like, "Well, maybe he can help me. I don't know." It's like it's a cool thing for Martin to think of. It's a very interesting dynamic between them because you've got this rescuer figure, but it's subverted by the fact that he's so pathetic and drunk, and Sansa actually sort of sympathizes down, to him. So,
I mean, it could have been Sandor. That's all I have to say.
Well, we'll get to that. We're going to have actually some great San action here later in this episode. So, San fans, or shall we say fans of the Sansa Sandor dynamic, will not be disappointed. All right, so let's get back to the scripty script. And by the way, I've been getting some donations coming in. I'm going to read those at the section break, but I have been getting them. Thanks very much, everybody. I appreciate that. Tons and tons. So here's what we've got. We can imagine Dantos, and I guess let me just read this again since I went off on a tangent. It says the way that the bells in Dantos appear is really great. It says basically you hear the rustle of leaves. And it says, the godswood was dim and dark, and the bells were ringing Joff into his grave. He staggered out from under the trees, reeling drunk. So it's like you hear the bells, you see the trees, and then Dantos emerges with the bells ringing. So it really reminds you of Aegon Jingle Bell or even Patchface with their fool's bells ringing about them. And you'll notice that Dantos emerges amidst the rustling of the leaves in the godswood. And of course, rustling godswood leaves imply green seer talk. Then Dantos staggers out from under the trees. Those are both green seer clues, indicating the fool figure as a stag man, like Patchface, who wears an antlered helm, or like the Azor Ahai as the black stag that Asha saw when she was dying, or at least passing out. And then, of course, the under the trees line refers to green seers who live under the trees. So he's staggering out from under the trees. This is amidst the whispers of the godswood. It's pretty, like I said, I always look for the multiple correlations. There you go. It's like 3 green seer references all clustered together. And so once again, the Florian Jonquil dynamic is mentioned, which reemphasizes Dantos as playing a husband role to Sansa's Nissa Nissa. So Dantos is a foolish stag man Azor Ahai, the red sot of heroes. And as it turns out, he is indeed selling his Nissa Nissa's life in return for dragons, which sound like meteors.
Lord Peter, Sir Dantos called from the boat. I must needs row back before they think to look for me. Peter Baelish put a hand on the rail. But first you'll want your payment. 10,000 dragons, was it? 10,000. Dantos rubbed his mouth with the back of his hand. As you promised, my lord. Sir Lothar, the reward. Lothar Brun dipped his torch. 3 men stepped to the gunwale, raised crossbows, fired. One bolt took Dantos in the chest as he looked up, punching through the left crown on his surcoat. The others ripped into the throat and the belly. It had happened so quickly, neither Dantos nor Sansa had time to cry out. When it was done, Lothar Brun tossed the torch down on top of the corpse. The little boat was blazing fiercely as the galley moved away. You killed him. Clutching the rail, Sansa turned away and retched. Had she escaped the Lannisters to tumble into worse? My lady, Littlefinger murmured, your grief is wasted on such a man as that. He was a sot and no man's friend. But he saved me. He sold you for a promise of 10,000 dragons. Your disappearance will make them suspect you in Joffrey's death. The gold cloaks will hunt. The eunuch will jingle his purse. Dantos? Well, you heard him. He sold you for gold, and when he drunk it up, he would have sold you again. A bag of dragons buys a man's silence for a while, but a well-placed quarrel buys it forever.
And I heard a couple people in the chat mention that that was their favorite Littlefinger line. It definitely encompasses his philosophy. But unfortunately, what we have here is Dantos simply got the answer wrong. He should have asked for 1,000,000 dragons, not 100,000. That was the problem. As you can see, or 10,000 rather. As you can see, foolish Azor Ahai has sold his Moon Maiden for a bag of dragons. That's pretty great meteor shower stuff. I mean, he's literally converting a Nissa Nissa figure into a spherical object containing dragons. Peter, however, foresees him drinking up these hard-won moon dragons, which represent the fire of the gods, of course. So in other words, Dantos is seeking the fire of the gods, which he wants to consume. But that kills him, of course, as it always does. And we can see that, or at least it triggers, either death or death transformation. Of course, that's kind of a continuum. We know that. And we can see that his 10,000 dragons turn out to be 3 projectiles, much in the way that the 1,000,000 dragons of Carthian myth are symbolized by Dany's 3 dragons. The archers shooting down from above in a surprise betrayal attack is yet another parallel to the Red Wedding, where we had traitorous archers shooting down from above and a fool character dying. Pretty obvious once you notice it. As for Sansa hurling over the rail, well, whenever a Moon Maiden retches, that's just what it looks like. It's a moon face cracking open to pour forth rivers of unpleasant things. It works in parallel to the dragon arrows descending from above at the same moment. So just as Cat was thrown into the river after the Red Wedding, we have, in a mockery of the Tully funeral rites, we have yet another strange mockery or facsimile of the Tully funeral rites, as the boat containing Dantos, now corpse Dantos, is set on fire. More importantly, this is a screamingly obvious sea dragon clue, a parallel to the burning wooden gods of the 7 on Dragonstone, which were made from the mass of Targaryen ships. So they were burning ships and dragons and gods, all those things. This is Azor Ahai entering the Weirwood Net, obtaining the fire of the gods and undergoing fire transformation, as we've seen countless times before. The Grey King possessing the fire of the sea dragon, for example, which is both a Weirwood boat and a burning tree. All right, well, that does it for this chapter. Now it's time to set sail for Peter's ancestral home on the Fingers. And also time to check in with Sanrixian, who has gotten completely lost in this amazing Sansa picture.
I'm gone. I'm into jewels. Sorry.
Was there a plan? Yeah, no, this is great. I told you could feel free to just vamp out on One Piece, I mean, if that's what you're feeling. And this thing looks awesome, so nobody's complaining.
Okay. Well, I'll make up for it in the Q&A section.
Oh, you've got nothing to make up for. Oh, you mean make up for the sort of we need some lowbrow art to balance out this very highbrow art here.
Don't worry.
Eyebrow art. Get it? She's got prominent eyebrows. All right, cool. I like how this is coming. Mary, why don't you tell me what you think of what you're hearing so far?
I think it's great. I love one of my favorite bits about the escape is Sansa in the Hound's dyed cloak. I always think that that's such a good detail and a really good example of something the fandom has noticed because it's just been a long time for us to stew on the text. So that always stands out to me. And then it's insane, this underworld kind of imagery once you start looking for it. And that's always one of my favorite things about your episodes is how obvious a lot of it seems once you find it.
Yeah, that's actually the hidden secret to this is that writing these things is always just like a matter of catching a thread. Once you have a thread and you start pulling on it, it's all there for you and it kind of just writes itself. And most of the skill comes in like just figuring out the order of explaining it, making these, like once you tune in, like I said, to the underworld imagery, you see it everywhere. She's in a dream, she's in the Godswood, she's under the Red Keep, she's on a ghost ship. I mean, it's really heavy. So
I also wanted to say you faked me out because in the last version of the script that I saw, I'm pretty sure you'd taken out the Dany sex line. And then here I am reading it again this time. And I'm like, oh no, how am I going to read this without giggling? And as I think has been discussed on the Twitteros this week, of all the things we love about George R. R. Martin, the way that he writes those sorts of scenes is not necessarily one of his stronger suits. So it kind of gives me church giggles. But it's a beautiful, the rest of the scene is great, and that's what gets me about it, is it's this beautiful, beautiful imagery surrounded by this very awkward description of what, lest we forget, is a 14-year-old. Anyway.
Anyway. Yeah. We delved into that one pretty hard on the Nauticast episode about that Dany chapter. So if you guys are interested in serious discussion of that whole Drogo Dany dynamic and what works and what doesn't about it, then check out the Nauticast episode on that Dany chapter where I was a guest and we had a ton of fun. And that's also the chapter with the Moon Meteor prophecy. So that's probably why they invited me on. But we did take a good 15-20 minutes to talk about the Dany Drogo thing, and I thought it was a pretty good discussion.
Yeah, both the episodes you've done with Nauticast are great. So if any of your acolytes have not checked that out yet, I strongly recommend they do. It's a really good dynamic with all three of y'all.
Oh, thanks, Mary. Yeah, it was a ton of fun, and I'll definitely be getting Jeff and Emmett on upcoming Between Two Weirwoods episodes. And actually, let me go ahead and make some Between Two Weirwoods announcements now that the subject has come up. There will be, let me just get my dates. Sanri, was it the 26th, our panel?
Yeah, the 26th.
So on the 26th, we're going to be doing a panel on religion in A Song of Ice and Fire. And that's going to be with Sanrixian and Brynden Beefish and the
19th, the week before that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to think of her Patreon name. Okay, I guess she uses her real name on Twitter. So yeah, Gretchen Ellis, who is from the Fundamentals podcast, which I was a guest on just a couple weeks ago. She has some sort of degree on religious studies, and Sanrixian has an art history degree, which overlaps very heavily with religion and religious art and mythology and stuff like that. And of course, Brynden Beefish is a man with an interesting religious background as well. So we are going to talk about all things religion. We're going to talk about George's things that he pulls from Catholicism and other religions. We're going to talk about the religions in the story. Oh, right, Nienna the Wise. It's right there. Yes, so Gretchen, a.k.a. Nienna the Wise, will be on that day. So essentially we'll be talking, like I said, about the religions in the story, about how it motivates people, the external religious influences on the story, some of the psychology around belief and how it motivates people. So there's a lot to talk about there, as you can see. So that is going to be a ton of fun, that one. And a week before that, we're going to be doing a really interesting panel with Jinx Lier, who is in the chat, or at least was earlier. I'm not sure if Jinx is still hanging out, but say something if you are, Jinx. This panel is going to be one that she actually pitched to me. It is going to be about sex workers in A Song of Ice and Fire. And so Jinx is a sex worker and an advocate for sex worker rights in the community, as everyone knows if you are on Twitter and friends with Jinx. And so we are going to rip into that topic. She's going to answer questions, very mature and responsible questions, I'm sure, which everyone will have. And we're going to talk about sex workers in the story and in real life and everything having to do with that. And it'll be mostly Jinx talking. And she will also have a couple of other guests with experience. So yeah, that's going to be fun. We're going to talk about sex workers and religion in back-to-back weeks, and I'm sure that my YouTube comments will be wonderful and pure. Right? Yeah, it's no controversy there, but we're not afraid of controversy. Neither is George Martin, obviously, so we are diving into those topics. All right. So let's get back to the script. All right. It's time for some flamenco guitar. Petey got fingered. This next section is sponsored by 4 more priests and priestesses of Starry Wisdom, Patchface of Motley Wisdom, obscured by clouds, the mayor of Walrusville, guest of the Yupik, and servant of Bodhi. Nyessa, the water nymph, goddess of pain and mercy. And Jancy Lee, lady of the waves, bear mama of the sacred den. Thank you, folks. And of course, Nyssa the water nymph is an especially apt nickname for this episode. So good job choosing that one. All right, this next chapter is mostly about Peter Baelish, and to a lesser extent, Lysa. However, the Sansa bits in it will act as jumping off points to some pretty cool world mythology. So we're going to talk about both Peter and Sansa, and a little bit of Lysa, and a little bit of Marillion. Bastard that he is. All right. This chapter begins.
A little Lysa all night long, a little bit. Sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, singing is. Feel free to break out into song at any time. Everyone likes that. So the next chapter, begins with the Merlin King drawing close to the shore near Peter's meager holdings on the Fingers, which is the name for the series of stony peninsulas on the northwest coast of the Vale. For the most part, this place, the Fingers, seems to serve as an analog to the Eyrie, with the same symbolism in miniature. The main features are sheep, sheep shit, and stones. Peter calls himself Lord of Sheep Shit and Master of the Drearfort, for example. A moment later, he comments that the Fingers are a lovely place if you happen to be a stone, which is actually ironic since Sansa is changing her name to Elaine Stone. A stone in the Fingers. Are we talking about throwing rocks? Ice Moon Apocalypse! Oh, sorry, too soon. Peter also quips that no one has made off with any of my rocks or sheep pellets, that I see plainly. So I do apologize, but I must break the seal on the number 2 symbolism. By which I mean, well, the sheep pellets. First, the sheep. How about that? Sheep are interesting for 2 reasons. Craster sacrifices sheep to the others when he doesn't have any male sons handy, which sort of implies the others, Craster's sons, as analogous to sheep in some sense. And indeed, a couple of people, like Sweet Sunray, for example, have done research along these lines. Craster, the father of at least a handful of White Walkers, himself wears sheepskin and has curly white body hair as well. The other thing that's interesting about sheep is that they have black skin and white wool. So they are a nice visual depiction of a black fire moon meteor dragon locked in the ice. You knew I was going to say it. A black sheep locked in wool, I suppose it would be. Think of Jon when he goes over to the others as the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing.
Jon wheeled and followed Tormund back toward the head of the column, his new cloak hanging heavy from his shoulders. It was made of unwashed sheepskins, worn fleece side in, as the wildlings suggested. It kept the snow off well enough, and at night it was good and warm. But he kept his black cloak as well, folded up beneath his saddle.
So Jon going north of the wall is definitely one symbolic depiction of him going into the ice, under the ice, beyond the icy veil or curtain, and so on and so forth. Slapping a sheepskin on him works on a few levels, as you can see. It depicts Jon's locked in ice status. It makes the excellent wolf in sheep's clothing joke, and it shows Jon as a kind of good other, armored in ice, if you will. But hidden away under his saddle is his black cloak, just as Jon retains a bit of his true identity as a brother of the Watch underneath. And I would say just as Sansa retains her Sansa Stark identity somewhere under the Elaine Stone cloak that she wears. One other thing about sheep. The Valyrians were shepherds before they were dragon lords. Does this imply Azor Ahai, the blood of the dragon, as a shepherd of the others? Maybe. Or you might say that Azor Ahai turned Night's King is like the sheep all-father, like Craster. So that's my take on sheep. They represent the Ice Moon and the others. And those black sheep pellets would represent the expulsion of the dragons locked in ice, I believe. And yes, I just called Jon a sheep pellet. Oh well. That's why Peter mentions the sheep pellets in the same breath with stones several times, because they're basically the same thing. Moon meteor pellets and stones. Peter remarks upon the familiar Peter remarks upon the familiar scent of the dung fire in the hearth, which kind of implies them as burning moon meteors in the hearth. And that sounds like some Bloodstone Emperor magic to me. How do you like that one, Sanri?
I'm releasing everyone from the Shame Cube who is in the Shame Cube for any kind of poop magic until the end of this podcast.
Yes, we are. That's right. That's that's what it's all about. Come on out, guys. Where's Raven Salix? When I broke out the poop symbolism and you're not here. Oh well. She's on a different time zone. But in any case, the more interesting Peter Baelish symbolism, more interesting than the sheep pellets, awaits inside, above that very same hearth.
Above the hearth hung a broken longsword and a battered oaken shield, its paint cracked and flaking. The device painted on the shield was one Sansa did not know, a gray stone head with fiery eyes upon a light green field. My grandfather's shield, Peter explained when he saw her gazing at it. His own father was born in Braavos and came to the Vale as a sellsword in the hire of Lord Corbray, so my grandfather took the head of the Titan as his sigil when he was knighted. It's very fierce, said Sansa. Rather too fierce for an amiable fellow like me, said Peter. I much prefer my mockingbird.
I have to say that this was a great Roy Dotrice reading on this one. Rather too fierce for an amiable fellow like me. It was a good one when I read it. Listened back to it recently.
Littlefinger is one of his best voices.
Ah, that's true. That's definitely true, now that you pointed out. So we remember the ghost of High Heart speaking of Sansa slaying a savage castle, or a savage giant rather, in a castle built of snow. And of course, it's commonly held in the fandom that Peter is that giant via his Titan of Braavos head sigil. He rules atop the giant's lance once he becomes Lord Protector of the Eyrie, which you could sort of see as the head of the giant mountain, perhaps. And Gregor Clegane, the mountain of a man who parallels the giant's lance, has his head removed, supposedly. And here's Peter with the Titan of Braavos' severed head on his old sigil. Of course, we know what beheadings are all about in mythical astronomy terms. It signifies solar and lunar death. The sun and moon are quite often seen as floating faces with invisible bodies. So beheading a moon person amounts to plucking the moon from the sky. Gregor Clegane is a fire moon warrior before his beheading, and only afterward does he get locked in the snow-white armor of the Kingsguard. So his beheading is the same symbolism as him breaking off his giant's lance in Sir Hugh's throat. Put it this way. Imagine the dark stone of the giant's lance as the decapitated head of the fire moon giant crash-landed in the snow. That's what Peter represents. His family comes to the Vale with a fiery-eyed Titan head, but gets caught in the grasp of the fingers of the Vale, and finally, the icy Eyrie itself. The Titan head is also implied as sinking into the sea as it appears on a light green field. Peter then swaps it for his mockingbird, and mockingbird folklore in the real world turns out to be closely related to mermaids and sirens. All of them share one key personality trait, which is that they lure and entrap the unwary, often luring them to their doom. And you can quickly see how this kind of folklore is a natural fit for Peter. And here I will stop and give a shout out to the Disputed Lands, who is the mermaid expert and first turned me on to mermaid symbolism way back in the day. And no, that's not a sexy mermaid turn-on joke. The Disputed Lands, although, yeah, I would probably fall for the mermaid, let's be honest. So the Disputed Lands does have a video coming out soon on mermaid stuff. So I don't know what that's going to be called, but you should all go and subscribe to Disputed Lands and look forward to her mermaid and siren video, which is coming soon. Got to wet the whistle, folks. Let's see what Sanri's doing here. Oh boy, we're going deep. Sanri's muted, but she's probably saying something interesting, I'm sure.
Oh, I was talking about crystals. You know, just witch things.
That is fucking sick, dude.
It's getting cool.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's worth appreciating. Okay, back to the magic. So let's talk about mermaids. I'll do this as briefly as I can, which means about 20 minutes. We've talked about mermaids before. Yes, we have. When the moon goddess is depicted as falling into the sea, as in the sea dragon myth and the related scene with Dany dipping into the womb of the world, she can be seen as becoming a mermaid or sea goddess. That's our best reading of the Elenai Durin Godsgrief legend, where Durin Godsgrief steals the daughter of the wind and sea gods, who must logically be an aquatic figure. And this provokes the divine wrath of the gods in the form of a tremendous storm. I believe this is simply another version of the idea of a powerful green seer magician stealing the moon goddess, who can be seen as a mermaid. The Grey King, the notorious godly fire stealer himself, also marries a mermaid, and this to me reads as yet another way of implying the Grey King as possessing the moon meteor mojo, which might actually refer to the sea stone chair, that oily black thing that dropped straight out of Cthulhu land and landed on the shores of Old Wick. But never mind that. We're talking about mermaids. And here's the thing about mermaid legends, which are plentiful and rich in nature. They almost always revolve around the idea of forbidden love, based on the idea that mermaids cannot really be happy out of the sea, and humans cannot really be happy or alive in the sea. Often the mermaid or siren is luring and entrapping humans to draw them under the water, and sometimes it's the other way around, with the human trapping the mermaid or selkie on land, which, spoiler alert, doesn't usually work out very well. Martin references some of this mythology in an old Andal legend about their founding hero, Hugor of the Hill, here named as Huko.
An old legend told in Pentos claims that the Andals slew the swan maidens who lured travelers to their deaths in the Velvet Hills that lie to the east of the Free City. A hero whom the Pentoshi singers called Huko led the Andals at that time, and it is said that he slew the 7 maids not for their crimes, but instead as sacrifice to his gods. There are some maesters who have noted that Huko may well be a rendering of the name Hugor.
Here we find Hugor/Huko slaying the Swan Maidens, and as you can see, they are doing the standard siren thing of luring travelers to their doom. Interestingly, elsewhere we find Hugor Hell marrying an aquatic woman instead of slaying one, and this is actually Tyrion reciting from the 7-pointed star in A Dance with Dragons.
The maid brought him forth a girl, as supple as a willow with eyes like deep blue pools, and Hugo declared that he would have her for his bride.
Willow trees happen to grow near water, and their mythology reflects this by associating willow trees with water and the moon. Hecate, the Greek goddess of the moon and sorcery, is associated with the willow, for example. And together with the eyes like blue pools, Hugor's maiden is definitely an aquatic figure. So point being, as is so often the case, the line between fucking and fighting is quite blurry with Hugor, as he's both killing and marrying aquatic maidens. It's the same with Durn and Elenai, actually. His claiming of Elenai from the gods dooms her to a mortal's lifespan, and thus Durn is kind of killing her as well as marrying her. That kind of fits the whole Azor Ahai Nissa Nissa vibe, and of course the celestial analog of the sun killing his wife, the moon. One other point on willows. They're often called weeping willows, which just is, kind of convenient for the weeping symbolism that George already has going on. Oh, and I suppose I should mention this line about Sansa's eyes from A Feast for Crows.
Peter studied her eyes, as if seeing them for the first time. You have your mother's eyes, honest eyes and innocent, blue as a sunlit sea. When you are a little older, many a man will drown in those eyes. Sansa did not know what to say to that.
Get a job, Peter. That's what you say. Quit being a creep. Get a job.
Get a job. Yeah, for sure. But of course, in terms of symbolism, this is interesting. A sunlit sea isn't quite a blue pool, but of course you realize it is much the same symbolism. And look, Sansa is trying to drown men in her sunlit sea eyes, just like a swan maiden of Andal legend. Best of all, Sansa, just like the willowy maiden of Andal legend, is also married to Hugor Hill.
YOLO. YOLO sounds like something you might name a monkey. Worse, it is a Pentoshi name, and any fool could see that Tyrion was no Pentoshi. In Pentos I am YOLO, he said quickly, to make what amends he could. But my mother named me Hugor Hill. Are you a little king or a little bastard? Asked Halden.
So that was from A Dance with Dragons. And Halden's question refers to the fact that Hugor Hill is both the name of the greatest and first Andal king, but also that Hill is the bastard name in the Westerlands, just as Snow is in the north and Stone is in the Vale. And of course, my little joke was that Sansa is technically married to Tyrion, or was, or however that works, which kind of ties a neat little bow on the aquatic lady symbolism. She's got eyes like blue seas, and she's married to Hugor Hill. Pretty cool. So here's where Peter and mockingbirds come in. The mockingbird does much the same thing as sirens and swan maidens. Real mockingbirds are, of course, known for their amazing and uncanny ability to perfectly mimic a wide variety of sounds, even complex sounds like the shutter flash of an expensive camera, which is a sound that some birds hear a lot. This naturally gives rise to mockingbird legends, where the mockingbird uses its false voices and impressions to lure people to their doom, something like a siren or a mermaid. And if you stop and think about it, you'll realize that is exactly what Peter does. I mean, he doesn't wander the Red Keep trying to fool Varys by projecting his voice around corners or pretending to be Cersei or something, but he does use false words to lure the Starks time and time again. First, he and Lysa lure Ned and crew to King's Landing after murdering Jon Arryn and then blaming the Lannisters in the letter that Cat and Ned receive at the beginning of A Game of Thrones. This is actually the major mechanism of plot movement in the opening act of the story, and it's straight up mockingbird, siren, mermaid behavior in that Peter uses Lysa's voice, one that the Starks trust, to lie and lure the Starks to King's Landing, whereupon he lies some more to Ned and then betrays him. All of this comes across very strongly in a nightmare that Ned has while he's imprisoned in the black cells beneath the Red Keep, which is, of course, largely Littlefinger's doing.
The king heard him. "You stiff-necked fool," he muttered, "too proud to listen. Can you eat pride, Stark? Will honor shield your children?" Cracks ran down his face, fissures opening in the flesh, and he reached up and ripped the mask away. It was not Robert at all. It was Littlefinger, grinning, mocking him. When he opened his mouth to speak, his lies turned to pale gray moths and took wing.
So moths are almost always death symbols, and so here we see the mockingbird behavior summed up very well. Peter mocks, and then his lies are like death and entrapment. And that's exactly what's happened to Ned, who's trapped in the Red Keep black cells at that very moment by Peter's manipulations. Note also that Robert is a Stolar Stagman king all the way, and here we see him dying and giving way to the face of the Dark Solar King. And that's a great bit of mythical astronomy visualization, if I do say so myself. So after luring Ned and Cat, he then lures and abducts Sansa to the Eyrie, and his doing so aboard the Merling King brings the mermaid symbolism back into the, Merman, sorry. But Blue Steel jokes aside, Peter is both a mockingbird and a Merling King, luring Sansa with lies. Recall his light gray-green eyes, the colors of the sea. Gray and green, also of zombies. Going back to the Titan head, we can now see the full picture. The severed Titan's head on green shows us a fiery moon meteor landing in the sea, and its transformation into the mockingbird with Merling King symbolism depicts the moon meteor as having turned into a denizen of that metaphorical sea, who is now luring others in. Or translating to the Ice Moon and Vale language, we can say that Peter is at first like a fiery Titan head meteor landing in the ice of the Vale, like the giant's lance, whereupon he takes up residence there and then lures and entraps others. Now, in terms of Long Night archetypes, I bet you can guess who Peter Baelish is playing the role of. Night's King, of course. We mentioned this super briefly in A Baelish Bard and A Promised Prince, but the name Bael is, of course, the calling card of figures who steal Night's Queen people, who are often bards. There's Bael the Bard, who steals a Blue Rose associated daughter of Winterfell, only it turns out they were in love and had a son who became the Lord of Winterfell and then later killed Bael. Then in A Dance with Dragons, Mance Rayder, a bard king, beyond the wall in the image of Bael, sneaks into Winterfell as Bael did, wearing the name Abel, which is an anagram for Bael. His mission was, of course, to rescue whom he thought was Arya Stark, only it turns out to be the pale and corpse-like Jane Poole, a most unfortunate Night's Queen figure. Rhaegar is perhaps the most important Bale figure, even though he doesn't have the name. He is a Bard King, and of course he has a ton of Night's King symbolism, as we learned in Moons of Ice and Fire, the whole series, I guess. And most famously, he abducts Lyanna Stark of the Blue Winter Rose, though of course they may well have been in love and may have absconded together. So here we have Sansa, abducted from King's Landing by a Bale figure, Petyr Baelish. Petyr isn't a singer, but the other person who tries to come on to Sansa in a creepy way besides Petyr is a bard, and that, of course, would be Marillion the singer. Marillion and Petyr's stories come together in the High Hall of the Eyrie, when Marillion takes the fall for Lysa's murder, which was actually committed by Petyr. When Petyr comes on to Sansa in the Snow Castle scene and kisses her, she thinks that he was acting like Marillion. In other words, the symbolism is shuffled around a bit, but we still have the Bale element and the Bard element and the abduction of a Stark maiden. And there's a call out to Lyanna as Marillion escorts Sansa to the throne room for her confrontation with Lysa, actually.
Do you require guarding? Marillion said lightly. I am composing a new song, you should know. A song so sweet and sad it will melt even your frozen heart. The roadside rose, I mean to call it. About a base-born girl so beautiful, she bewitched every man who laid eyes upon her. I am a Stark of Winterfell, she longed to tell him.
She's a Stark of Winterfell with a frozen heart, who's also a rose. A winter rose, in other words. Oh, and Sansa is a witch who bewitches people. Well, maybe not Sansa, and maybe not Lyanna, but definitely Night's Queen and Nissa Nissa. They've got a witchy vibe going on for sure. And some of the other Night's Queen parallel figures, like Val, leaps to mind. Val's definitely got a witchy vibe going on, so we'll look into that more. But basically, just think about the Weirwood Goddess as being a kind of priestess or druid priestess or, something like that. You guys can see that. So anyways, the passage that really makes Petyr's Solar King turned Night's King status obvious is this one from A Game of Thrones, one which really sets the tone for Petyr as a character overall, and thus is worth quoting in full. Take it away, Maester Merry.
If ever truly a man had armored himself in gold, it was Petyr Baelish, not Jaime Lannister. Jaime's famous armor was but gilded steel, but Littlefinger, Tyrion had learned a few things about sweet Petyr to his growing disquiet. 10 years ago, Jon Arryn had given him a minor cincture in customs, where Lord Petyr had soon distinguished himself by bringing in 3 times as much as any of the king's other collectors. King Robert had been a prodigious spender. A man like Petyr Baelish, who had a gift for rubbing 2 golden dragons together to breed a third, was invaluable to his hand. Littlefinger's rise had been arrow-swift. Within 3 years of his coming to court, he was the master of coin and a member of the small council. And today, the crown's revenues were 10 times what they had been under his beleaguered predecessor, though the crown's debts had grown vast as well. A master juggler was Petyr Baelish. Oh, he was clever. He did not simply collect the gold and lock it in the treasure vault, no. He paid the king's debts in promises and put the king's gold to work. He brought wagons, shops, ships, and houses. He bought grain when it was plentiful and sold bread when it was scarce. He bought wool from the north and linen from the south and lace from Lys and stored it and moved it, dyed it, sold it. The golden dragons bred and multiplied, and Littlefinger lent them out and brought them home with hatchlings.
Oh, I'm muted. There we go. Sorry. That is a great scene. I mean, this is just awesome. Petyr's armored in gold and breeds dragons. You see how clever Martin was to name a mundane thing like a coin after a dragon. It allows him to say things like, so-and-so really has a knack for breeding dragons, and we don't even think about Valeria or genetic blood magic experimentation or anything. Clever, clever man. Clever George. And Petyr's cast as a clever man too here, of course, hinting at his Loki-like nature. Now, in terms of mythical astronomy, rubbing 2 dragons together to breed more equates to smashing the comet dragon into the moon mother of dragons, upon which time all the baby dragon moon meteors are born. The one who rubs the comet against the moon is usually seen as the sun. And indeed, Peter is armored in gold and compared to an obvious Solar King figure, Tywin. But when the comet is rubbed against the moon, and sorry if that sounds raunchy, it's meant to, the sun dies, or as we can say that it turns into the dark sun, which we think of as the Lion of Night, who came out during the long night after the Maiden Maid of Light, the bright face of the sun, hid her face from the world. Now, sometimes we see a bright Solar King turn into a dark Solar King, but other times we see the bright and dark sun as separate people, such as with the Maiden Maid of Light as the bright face of the sun, and the Lion of Night as the dark face of the sun. So the question is, where is the Lion of Night during the day? Just follow me here. Well, he's invisible. He's hiding out there beyond the atmosphere in the darkness of space. The night sun can therefore also be thought of as that darkness of space. And indeed, the Lion of Night is basically interchangeable with the Stranger, whom I always think of as deep space or the night sky, mainly because of this passage from A Clash of Kings.
And the seventh face. The stranger was neither male nor female, yet both. Ever the outcast, the wanderer from far places, less and more than human, unknown and unknowable. Here the face was a black oval, a shadow with stars for eyes.
One of my favorite scenes, definitely, and that was Lady Catelyn in a small local sept right before Renly's murder. A black shadow with stars for eyes definitely sounds like we're looking at the face of outer space. Space face. And since the comets are called wandering stars, right in the prologue of A Clash of Kings, the, quote, wanderer from far places sounds an awful lot like a comet coming from deep space, if you ask me. All of which is kind of a trippy way to say that in a certain sense, you can see the Lion of Night or the Stranger as sort of hiding out in the darkness of space during the day, but then sending the comet to kill the moon and the sun, to darken everything so he can come out. And that's exactly what Peter does at the Purple Wedding. He hid out, he's nowhere near the scene of the crime, but he orchestrates cat's paws, who are comet figures, to kill the sun and steal the moon away to the underworld. That's why we meet Peter on the ghost ship Merlin King, which floats on the Dark River. The Dark River is an underworld place and parallels the black ocean of space, as we mentioned earlier. So we can see that the very idea of a Merlin King essentially implies a king of the dark ocean underworld, more or less. So now that we have all the symbolism of giants and mockingbirds and mermaids and mermen down, plus a little nod to Lyanna Stark, let's get back to the chapter at hand and discover yet another mythological reference that implies Peter as trying to lure and entrap Sansa, and that is, of course, the pomegranate.
Grizzle reappeared before he could say more, balancing a large platter. She set it down between them. There were apples and pears and pomegranates, some sad-looking grapes, a huge blood orange. The old woman had brought a round of bread as well and a crock of butter. Peter cut the pomegranate in two with his dagger, offering half to Sansa. You should try and eat, my lady. Thank you, my lord. Pomegranate seeds were so messy. Sansa chose a pear instead and took a small, delicate bite. It was very ripe. The juice ran down her chin. Lord Peter loosened a seed with the point of his dagger. You must miss your father terribly, I know. Lord Eddard was a brave man, honest and loyal, but quite a hopeless player. He brought the seed to his mouth with a knife.
So this is one of the more well-known references to external mythology in the whole book, I would say, or the whole series. The pomegranate of the Persephone and Hades myth. It's also, excuse me, it's also incredibly good news for Sansa fans that she chooses not to eat the pomegranate. In any case, here is the super condensed version of the Persephone myth for those who might not know it or might not remember it in full detail. And here I'm going to use the summary from theoi.com because it's concise and I really couldn't do any better than they have already at writing a summary. So why try? Here it is. Maester Merry, take it away. Maester Merry?
Persephone was the goddess queen of the underworld, wife of the god Hades. She was also the goddess of spring growth. who was worshipped alongside her mother Demeter in the Eleusinian mysteries. This agricultural-based cult promised its initiates passage to a blessed afterlife. Persephone was titled Kor, the Maiden, as the goddess of spring's bounty. Once upon a time, when she was playing in a flowery meadow with her nymph companions, Kore was seized by Hades and carried off into the underworld as his bride. Her mother, Demeter, despaired at her disappearance and searched for her throughout the world, accompanied by the goddess Hecate, bearing torches. When she learned that Zeus had conspired in her daughter's abduction, she was furious and refused to let the earth fruit until Persephone was returned. Zeus consented, but because the girl had tasted of the food of Hades, a handful of pomegranate seeds, she was forced to forever spend a part of the year with her husband in the underworld. Her annual return to the earth in spring was marked by the flowering of the meadows and the sudden growth of new grain. Her return to the underworld in winter, conversely, saw the dying down of plants and the halting of growth. In other myths, Persephone appears exclusively as the queen of the underworld, receiving the likes of Hercules and Orpheus at her court. Persephone was usually depicted as a young goddess holding sheaves of grain and a flaming torch.
Okay, I'd love to give a quick shout out. I'm dying. Sorry. Quick shout out to the chat. We've got Joe Magician turning the conversation to himself and his own lack of pants. Egomaniac that he is. Thanks, Joe Magician. Hey, buddy. Called out. Hawaiian shirt, no pants. That's Matt. And then we've also got Anissa Nissa of Ashai dubbing Sansa Sansephone. It's pretty cool. Nice job. Like that one. Good wordplay. And Stephen Stark asks if I'm feeling better since last week, and indeed I am. No, you're not. You're helping about as much as Ralph there, Joe Magician. That's what I would say. I'm helping. So there you have it, guys. This is a pretty straightforward cycle of the seasons mythology with Persephone and Demeter. Demeter is an earth mother type fertility goddess, or Demeter, I guess. Demeter, I'm sorry. There's a quick backstory. I play bass guitar, as you know, and there is a bass guitar company that makes amps called Demeter, but they say it Demeter instead of Demeter, so that's why I say it the wrong way. Sorry. So Demeter, she is an earth mother type fertility goddess, which is why she can stop the earth from flowering when she is displeased by the absence of her daughter, who personifies the spring itself. Stealing a spring goddess and stopping the spring is kind of like the idea of the Night's King stealing dawn during the long night, if you think about it. And the key thing here is, of course, the pomegranate. Eating the seeds is what binds Persephone to the underworld for whatever reason. And this is the reason why one of Jon Snow's killers, Bowen Marsh, is nicknamed the Old Pomegranate. He sends Jon right along to the underworld, if you will. Sansa, however, she wisely refuses to eat Peter's pomegranate seeds. Good for her. So I suggested Peter as a Night's King figure, and it's not hard to see how that can overlap with the idea of Hades as a lord of the underworld, stealing Persephone away from the living world and binding her there with an offer of pomegranate seeds. Peter himself eats the seeds as he speaks of Eddard in the past tense, as a poor player of the Game of Thrones. But of course, it was Peter who sent Ned along to the underworld more than anyone else. He's literally picking the seeds out of the fruit as he speaks of Ned's death, almost as if Ned were the seed being plucked out of the realm of the living by Peter. Here we can see George performing a nice synthesis of Persephone pomegranate symbolism and the mockingbird mermaid symbolism. It's all about luring and entrapping, just what Peter's good at, that pointy-haired sleazeball that he is. So it shouldn't surprise you that the symbolism suggests Sansa as not falling for Peter's trap. Ultimately, that fits with her slaying the savage giant as a foreshadowing of her triumphing over Peter. The pear that she eats is not insignificant either, since pears symbolize immortality in Christian mythology and Chinese mythology and perhaps a couple others, because the pear tree will actually yield fruit for decades. So it's seen as immortal. It's also associated with the divine feminine pears are, such as the goddess Aphrodite, who was also called Venus. It's very much a choice in opposition of eating the pomegranate and signifies Sansa's future escape from the traps and prisons that she currently finds herself in. Now, a moment later, Littlefinger tries again to feed Sansa a messy red fruit, this time a blood orange. Again, he cuts it in half and offers one part to Sansa, but this time she takes it. And then we have this very funny interplay.
He tilted his chin back and squeezed the blood orange, so the juice ran down into his mouth. I love the juice, but I loathe the sticky fingers, he complained, wiping his hands. Clean hands, Sansa. Whatever you do, make certain your hands are clean. Sansa spooned some juice from her own orange.
In other words, Sansa is already learning Peter's lesson, using a spoon to drink the blood orange juice so her hands remain clean, as opposed to Peter, who is caught red-handed here. Peter is getting the weirwood stigmata, and he's eating the pomegranate. So it seems like he'll be stuck here for a while, and probably he'll die in the Vale, or I'd guess, perhaps in another Ice Moon place like Winterfell. Sansa, meanwhile, has her clean hands and chooses pears over palm seeds, so the prospects for escape are looking good. Oh, and what's this? I'm getting a mess. Yep. It seems there's more fruit symbolism having to do with Peter as a thief. That was our good friend from way back in the Westeros.org days and currently on the Twitter, Isabel Harper at Sarah T. Bazile, buzzing in to say that we need to talk about Idun and her apples of immortality. Idun, actually, it's pronounced Idun, I believe it is. So, thanks, Sarah. This is actually a Norse myth, and Idun is the Norse goddess of spring and rejuvenation, very like Demeter, actually. She was the keeper of the apples of immortality. That's her main thing. And it is these apples on which the gods depend to stay forever young. Although they aren't necessarily apples, in the original tale, the word used is a generic word for fruit. So that's actually often the case. Like in the Garden of Eden, we say apple, but we don't know if it was an apple. It doesn't really matter. It's a tree, a fruit from a tree. So in any case, you can guess what happens when Idun gets kidnapped. The gods grow old and weak because they can't eat her apples anymore. And this would be paralleled in a Song of Ice and Fire terms by the moon disaster, which caused the long night, of course. Moon goddess disappears and everybody gets old and dead and stuff. So the parallels to Sansa and the Eyrie come in the details of Idun's abduction. It's a two-part dirty deed, with Loki the trickster first deceiving Idun and luring her out past the walls of Asgard, where she was promptly set upon by the giant how do you say this one? It's Thjazi. I think it's Thjazi. Thjazi, yeah, that's it. Who was in league with Loki. So Thjazi was disguised as an eagle, and he bore Idun away to his mountain abode. And here we'll quote NorseMythology.org. This mountain abode was called Thrymheim, which means Thunderhome, and was situated in the highest mountain peaks, whose icy towers growled down at the fertile fields below. Sounds like someplace we know, doesn't it? I mean, if anything inspired the Eyrie, I would say that this seems like it, especially with so much of the Idun kidnapping storyline playing out here. It would seem that Peter plays the role of both Loki and the abducting giant Thjazi. Peter doesn't transform into an eagle, but by becoming Lord Protector of the Vale, he's essentially pretending to be the Falcon. And he's obviously abducting Sansa, the Idun figure. Peter's parallels to Loki should be abundantly obvious, I'm sure, knowing you myth heads as well as I do. Now, another great layer to this is the Fire of the Gods angle brought in by Idun's Fruit of Immortality. Once again, the Fire Moon figure is implied as carrying the fire of the gods, just as Nissa Nissa is the one who can impart the fire of the gods to man. Peter is therefore not only Loki and the giant who is kidnapping Idun, he's also a Lucifer or Grey King figure stealing the fire from heaven at great cost to everyone. So, last detail of the story, and this might be the coolest part. After Loki helps Thjazi kidnap Idun, the gods are, of course, wroth with him and force him to rescue Idun. Freya lends Loki her hawk or falcon feathers, depending on the tale, and this allows Loki to now transform into a hawk or falcon so that he can fly up to Thrymheim Thunderhome, which he does. He finds the giant away and Idun alone. And so then he transforms her into a chestnut so that he can carry her to safety. Don't ask me how he's able to do that. He just does. Now, you may recall the shade of hair that Sansa dyes her auburn red to. That's right, chestnut brown. It's mentioned on many occasions, and it really seems to clinch the Idun-Sansa parallels. So, making a prediction from the myth, I'd like to... So, making a prediction for A Song of Ice and Fire from the mythical parallels here, I'd look for some sort of Loki and or Falcon symbolism attached to whomever helps Sansa escape the Vale and Peter's clutches. Now, I do think that Sansa will largely engineer her own escape, but doubtless she will receive aid from someone. She's a Dragon Locked in Ice character, and there's always some sort of symbol of the returning comet, which awakens and breaks free the Dragon Locked in Ice. Now, to the point about her engineering her own escape, consider the Ghost of Highheart seeing Sansa as a maiden in a castle made of snow, slaying a savage giant. Idun is trapped in a snow castle by a giant and needs to be rescued, but George is telling us straight up that he's going to mess with the myth a bit, and that this time it's going to be Idun cutting that mother effing giant's head off instead, and you gotta like that. So there's actually a tiny bit more I want to say about this chapter before we bring this episode to a close, but I'm going to put in a section break here and use the last section as kind of an outro. That's actually a sentence I wrote several drafts ago. The last section is now no longer an outro. It's now a proper section. But in any case, this is the end of the section. So, guys, how did you like all that Sansa stuff?
Woo!
Yay, Sansa!
Queen in the North! Queen in the North!
Queen of the North! That's a lot of cool symbolism, and I really do want to shout out Isabel Harper once again, because I just really like how it's flipped around. You know, it's like Idun and Sansa are both trapped by the giant in the ice castle, but George, by showing us her slaying the giant, basically turns this myth into one of a princess that needs to be rescued into a princess cutting off the giant's head, and I think that's kind of a little more modern and cool. So I was pretty tickled about that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the coolest parts about Sansa's character as well, is that she really does get to, and I think is going to even more clearly become a really fun inversion of the princess in the tower kind of trope.
Yeah, agreed. I really want to see where her story goes, because like her symbolic parallels, as you were talking about, kind of follow Dany's. Like, and so she's kind of leading us towards what maybe Dany will be. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There's a ton of Sansa Dany parallels, as I've tried to bring to life here. And once we do that episode about Dany and her Greenseer symbolism, you're going to see it even more. So that's going to be fun. Yeah. So let's Sanrixian, let's do some art show and tell. Looks like you've moved on. So I'm getting requests for the completed, or at least the Sansa picture in the wherever you brought it to.
I will post on Twitter in a second here, but here's the full version.
Hot fucking damn.
Wow.
Let me make it big. There we go. Thank you, Mary.
I love how the hairnet isn't really on her hair, but sort of branching out into the snakes and stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Some snacks. Purple snakes. Yeah.
There is wild applause happening in the chat, Sanrixian.
Awesome.
Niana the Wise is asking me about my thoughts on Sansa Jon symbolism. Yeah, there is a lot of Sansa Jon parallels. I sort of mentioned it a little bit in that they're both dragon locked in ice figures, and Jon's whole thing basically is the dragon locked in ice. Sansa is essentially a female version of Jon when she's locked in the ice, and I expect her awakening from the Vale to also be spectacular and to have Ice Moon Apocalypse symbolism. And I'm going to get to that, but she, in one of the TWOW chapters, mild spoiler alert, she has the idea to create a kind of Kingsguard for Sweet Robin, which she calls the Winged Knights. and they, of course, will have other symbolism when we see them, just like the Kingsguard does. So this is Sansa creating others, if you will, or Ice Moon meteors. Painkiller Jane pipes in to say that Idun was also the wife of Bragi or Bragi, who is the god of poetry. So one of those harp playing guys. Totally.
I wanted to bring up too that Mal had brought up that one of the other interesting parallels with the blood orange is that that is what Arya uses to stain Sansa's dress all the way back in Game of Thrones.
Oh, that's true. So it's almost like she's able to take the blood orange mojo and like transmute it or something, huh?
And it's interesting too. And then we also read the quote about the melon morning star. So there's like a lot of Sansa getting pelted with fruit.
It really
Poor
is.
Sansa. Poor thing.
Get off the stage! Boo! Boo!
Yeah, it would be interesting to see who else gets pelted with fruit. I could think of a couple of other examples of fruit being thrown. There's one in Dorne. But other than that, I think Sansa is going to be our target of fruit tossing number one.
Oh.
Awesome. So hey guys, I want to take a quick bathroom break. Can you guys hold it down for like 2 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Stanley, show us your dragon. Tell us about your dragon.
This is gonna be Sansa as a wolf bat thing. The most metal Sansa. So the direct interpretation of the tale that's told of her fleeing from King's Landing.
I love it. I love metal Sansa.
Yes.
I like the dragon wings and kind of bat wing to look the same in their initial proto form.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have your tinfoil crown, Mary?
Oh, I do.
Oh, good. I think we should break that out while he's gone.
Yeah.
It'll be a nice little gift for when he gets back.
So guys, what crazy tinfoil should we talk about? How many of us do you think we can get put back in the shame cube if we respond to the bathroom break by just going back to the poop theme?
Let's go back to the poop scene. Wait.
Yeah.
We're great guests.
We're obviously doing a wonderful job holding down the fort here. Anything else that people have brought up in the chat? Oh, I like Rusted Revolver just said Arya hits Gendry with an apple.
Of course.
Arya is a big fruit thrower.
She is #1 fruit thrower. You want to shout out some names in the chat? We've had a consistent amount of people following, I think, the whole episode.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. Well, Aziz is here. We've had, I think, Rusted and Emma have been here most of the time. We've got Bernie here as well. Amanda from the Disputed Lands. Stephen Stark, and now who has told everyone to hide, which is a good idea.
That is a good idea.
We can just tell LML, I'm sorry everyone left while you were in the restroom. We just started talking about poop, and it was bad.
Just blame
that doesn't surprise me at all. Not even a little. Not even a little.
The tinfoil crown, but no one really took the tinfoil bait. I think the shame cube has been working a bit too well.
Well, the shame cube is basically the cesspool. So, and if you'll pardon me.
Yay!
Yay! So much tinfoil.
We need to get festive. It's time. It's time. We're bringing this one home. We're gonna get festive. All right.
All right. I'm going back to my crown of roses, but.
Oh yeah, you put on the tinfoil crown while I was gone, huh?
I did, yeah.
I wonder why.
We're trying to encourage the cesspool, you know.
It's their time now.
We talked a lot about the wolf bat, which have you gotten a load of this amazing wolf bat that Sanri is drawing?
No, let's see it here. Oh, nice. Pretty good. Yeah, I called that Werewolf Batgirl.
Werewolf Batgirl. Sansa.
Sansephone.
Oh, that's so much better.
Nice. Thanks, Mom. Yes, I did. Disputed Lands. I went potty all by myself too. I did it. Okay. So so let's stop and shout out the wonderful folks who have sent in some PayPal donations to Mythical Astronomy at paypal.me. Thanks, guys. And where did it go? There we go. Gmail playing tricks on me. So first we have Steven Stark, who says, because the man can keep us down, this community needs you and your beautiful brain. Thank you, Steven. I will take it. Bernadette Lang says, she didn't say anything. She just sent me money. That's also fine. Thank you, Bernie. Kevin Meeker says, thank you, LML. You're very welcome. It is my pleasure to entertain you all on this fine Sunday. Joe Thompson says, keep up the fantastic work. Your fans love you. Fuck YouTube. Thank you, Joe. I believe that sentiment is shared by many people. Gretchen Ellis, Niana the Wise, sent a super chat and says, can't wait to see you discuss how Arya and Sansa are two sides of the same weirwood goddess coin, just different perspectives. Goddess of death, vengeance more strongly for Arya, and love, Lightbringer more strongly for Sansa, but many ancient goddesses show this kind of dual symbolism, which is not all that different from the King of Summer-Winter duality. Whoa, dude. Yeah, you guys are going to see when Gretchen gets on Between Two Weirwoods that she rolls deep with the knowledge. Yes, she does. She's very impressive. And I will eventually get to this topic, Arya and Sansa and the Weirwood Goddess stuff. In fact, I'll shout out Ravenous Reader, who today found a section where Arya thinks about her face as a dark pool when she's in the House of Black and White. And this, of course, evokes the Black Pond in the Winterfell Godswood and implies Arya as like literally the face of death, the face of space, face of the stranger. And of course, Arya is basically, does have all those death goddess symbols, the Night Wolf, the faceless girl. And that's another way of cool saying faceless girl, like her face is a black pool. It's like just a black void.
That imagery is all over Arya's chapters in House of Black and White. It's not just the still black pool. She also is told to keep her face as still as stone, and she thinks about standing as still as a statue. It's fun and nuts how like hot and heavy George is with the death goddess imagery, and specifically with the like stone and steel pool imagery with Arya. It's really, really cool.
Totally. Oh, nice. You've got the Batgirl.
Of course.
Nice, nice. And Jinx Lier has named me an off-brand Slash in a Guns N' Roses cover band that only plays kids' birthday parties. This is actually my Bootsy hat. And if I put on the Bootsy wig, then it's like a white Bootsy outfit. But yeah, it's whatever you think it is, Jinx. That works. So basically, yeah, after so many 420 breaks, I put the glasses on because it just works better. So we have a podcast here to talk about, and we're going to need some flamenco guitar music. In the clutches of the others. On behalf of Lady Shar, wielder of the Sacred Shard, Ice Priestess of the House of the Unsleeping, I'd like to welcome 3 new members of the Starry Wisdom Priesthood. Sir Aenys Frey of the Loud Water, Ridiculous Ed Tolle, the firebrand of the Dragonglass Forge, whose eyes are like pale morning mist, and Mathar O'Moontown, fisher of the Shining Sea. All right. Where's that cough? This is going to require some henny too. And it looks like I've left it on Sanri's window here. We're watching you draw feet.
Oh, how exciting.
Well, now we're back to me drinking alcohol, so. No chaser. Don't need no chaser with fine cognac. By the way, here's this will be fun. Drinking tips from LML. When you are taking a shot, of high-priced liquor. There is actually a right and a wrong way to do it. Somebody told me one time. And this is how you do it, especially tequila. What you do is you take the shot and keep your mouth closed so that you do not take in any air with the shot. Because, little known fact, it's actually the oxygen combining with the alcohol that makes your tongue burn. And so what happens is, if you take the shot, keep your mouth closed and don't breathe, you can taste the liquor more and not have the burn feeling happen. Then you swallow, experiencing the full flavor. Then you open your mouth and breathe, and the burn isn't nearly as bad. And so you both taste the shot better, and you don't get the burn. So if you're ever taking a shot of tequila or good liquor, that's how you do it. Ever heard that, either one of you guys?
Yes, actually. But
You know about that?
yeah.
I'm going to say I'm not sure that I ever drink high enough quality alcohol that anyone would have given me that particular advice, but I'm impressed at how classy you are.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the takeaway here. You can only come to one place for this show, huh?
Okay, I think my hat is distracting people a little too much. I'll just keep the glasses. I'll keep the smoking glasses. No, but I'll also need my... Hang on a second. The hat went and left a big red line across my forehead, so I can't look like a dork with a big line across my forehead. So we'll go... I don't know what you call this look, but it's what's happening. So here we go. There's actually quite a lot that goes on in this second chapter before Sansa gets to the Vale that we haven't talked about. And some of that I'm going to save for when we talk about the Snow Castle, Lysa Flies Out the Moondoor chapter. But there are 3 things that I do want to highlight before we head out of here, starting with a guest appearance by the Hound, Sandor Clegane. That's right. Sandor definitely makes an appearance in the back half of this chapter. The first sighting comes in the form of an actual dog.
It was 8 long days until Lysa Arryn arrived. On 5 of them it rained, while Sansa sat bored and restless by the fire, beside the old blind dog. He was too sick and toothless to walk guard with Brian anymore, and mostly all he did was sleep. But when she patted him, he whined and licked her hand, and after that, they were fast friends.
So Jinx has dubbed this look LML Unplugged. And somebody else has said that I have taken pretentious to a whole new likable level, to which I say, as long as it's likable, then we're good.
You kind of look like Hunter S. Thompson with horns.
It's a little Hunter Thompson. That's how I'm feeling too right now. Because that Night King hiding in outer space line of night shit was pretty trippy, man. I wrote that last night, to be honest. I had this essay all set and I was reading over and I was like, oh, dude, I'm totally going there. And I put in those 4 paragraphs about the line of night living in outer space. So I hope I didn't like scramble anyone's brains there or anything, but woo!
I assumed he lived in outer space.
Where else would he live, I guess?
Yeah.
So we've got a dog. Sansa's made friends with an old blind dog. So what, right? Well, later that night, after the wedding, that's Lysa and Peter's wedding, of course, when Sansa is going to sleep, the dog becomes a little more interesting.
Sansa found Brian's old blind dog in her little alcove beneath the steps and lay down next to him. He woke and licked her face. "You sad old hound," she said, ruffling his fur.
Aww. Sad old hound, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Now we begin. Think about the hound being too sick and toothless to walk guard anymore, and then think of how Sandor the Hound has seemingly become the gravedigger at the Quiet Isle, where he has traded in his sword for a plowshare, or we might say a shovel. He's sort of gone silent, and he's toothless in the sense that he's not swinging his sword anymore, and he doesn't stand guard or fight as he's done his whole life. So, yeah, kind of a similar thing there. And then the very next sentence has Marillion arriving, drunk and boorish, and that's putting it nicely. And look, you know somebody is bad when they're cruel to animals.
The old dog raised his head and growled, but the singer gave him a cuff and sent him slinking off, whimpering.
What a dick. So there's the old sad hound. He's trying to protect Sansa, as Sandor did at King's Landing. The dog fails, but then Lothar Brune arrives to halt the attempted assault. Except, is it Lothar Brune?
Sansa heard the soft sound of steel on leather. Singer, a rough voice said, "Best go if you want to sing again." The light was dim, but she saw a faint glimmer of a blade. The singer saw it too. "Find your own wench." The knife flashed and he cried out, "You cut me! I'll do worse if you don't go." And as quick as that, Marillion was gone. The other remained, looming over Sansa in the darkness. "Lord Peter said to watch out for you." It was Lothar Brune's voice, she realized. Not the hound's. No, how could it be? Of course, it had to be Lothar. That night, Sansa scarcely slept at all, but tossed and turned just as she had above the Merling King. She dreamt of Joffrey dying, but as he clawed at his throat and the blood ran down across his fingers, she saw with horror that it was her brother Robb. And she dreamed of her wedding night too, of Tyrion's eyes devouring her as she undressed. Only then he was bigger than Tyrion had any right to be, and when he climbed into the bed his face was scarred on only one side. "I'll have a song from you," he rasped, and Sansa woke and found the old blind dog beside her once again. "I wish that you were lady," she said.
No, she doesn't. No, she doesn't. She doesn't wish she was lady. That's not exactly what she wishes. I think the dream makes it obvious what she's wishing here. And this is basically Sand Central. So Sansa thinks that Lothar is Sandor, then dreams of Sandor. Then the last sentence has Sandor talking to Sansa as she wakes up, only to find the old blind dog, almost as if Sandor had transformed into the sad old hound. And right before that, it's basically the opposite, where the hound transforms into Lothar Brune almost. So she's got this dog protector figure all around, and Sandor is just conjured all over the scene. So, and then the other thing I noticed is the potential other wordplay, of course. I'm sure you guys caught it too. When Marillion leaves, quote, "The other remained." And that other happens to have other in his name, as Lothar without the L is Othor, or Othor, other. And say, isn't Othor the name of a Night's Watchman who was whited in Game of Thrones? The same guy who had the moon face that filled Jon's world before he slashed it with a sword and then burned it? I suggested that his name, Othor, and his ice moon face makes him representative of the others in general, and I must make the same conclusion about Lothar Brune here. He appears and cuts Marillion, drawing blood, and I'm reminded of the others bloodying their swords on Sir Waymar here. Marillion is a Baelish bard Night's King figure, in parallel to Peter, as I mentioned earlier, and so what we have here is Lothar Brune essentially being cast as the good other, the Eldrick Snowbeard, Blood of the Other Stark figure, who's also overlaps with the Hellhound and Sandor. So you could almost imply kind of a blood magic ritual here, where Lothar the Other needs the blood of Night's King, Baelish bard, Marillion, to come alive, if you will. Now, flashing back to Dantos' death scene, we find more other wordplay for Lothar, which some of you noticed when we read it the first time.
Sir Lothar, the reward. Lothar Brune dipped his torch. 3 men stepped to the gunwale, raised crossbows, fired. One bolt took Dantos in the chest as he looked up, punching through the left crown on his surcoat. The others ripped into throat and belly.
Sounds almost a bit like the prologue of a Game of Thrones again, doesn't it? With the others ripping into the poor Sir Waymar. Lothar commands the others here, which again fits his symbolism. So finally, Lothar's nickname is Lothar Apple Eater, for his capturing or killing of 3 Fossaways during the Battle of the Blackwater. But considering Sansa as Idun, Lothar the Apple Eater might imply the others as immortal in some sense, having eaten the apples of immortality. Ice preserves, after all. Or it could be implying Lothar as playing a reanimated good other Eldrick figure who also does seem to be a green zombie, with the apples being symbolic of him being resurrected, because the zombies seem to be immortal once they're raised until they're burned or hacked to pieces. So I kind of favor the former, in that Lothor is implied as obtaining the fiery apples of the gods, but then has become a frozen fire of the gods figure. Sandor himself, you know, he deserves an entire essay, but it should be clear at a glance that he is also a fire and ice, Azor Ahai reborn, hellhound figure who very much overlaps with the good other archetype. That's why Sandor is almost like an honorary Stark, with his gray eyes and his Stark-like looks. And I've talked about, obviously, the fact that the Stark direwolves are the same thing as hellhounds. So that's why Sandor is basically protecting Starks throughout his whole arc, because he essentially is an honorary in Stark, at least in archetype terms. So basically after Sandor kills Micah the Butcher's Boy, all he does the whole rest of the story is protect Starks, either Arya or Sansa. So much so that Sansa actually imagines Sandor as her mysterious protector when it's actually Lothor coming to her aid. All right, so there is your Sandor appearance, channeled through Lothor Brune and the blind old dog. So now let's let Lysa, the Night's Queen, make her appearance. Her Night's Queen symbolism comes across very clearly when she arrives at the Fingers to meet Peter.
Peter knelt to kiss her fingers. The King's Small Council commanded me to woo you and win you, my lady. Do you think you might have me for your lord and husband? Lady Lysa pooched her lips and pulled him up to plant a kiss on his cheek. Oh, mayhaps I could be persuaded, she giggled. Have you brought gifts to melt my heart? The King's peace. Oh, pooh the peace. What else have you brought me? My daughter. Littlefinger beckoned Sansa forward with a hand. My lady, allow me to present to you Elaine Stone. Lysa Arryn did not seem greatly pleased to see her. Sansa did a deep curtsy, her head bowed. A bastard? She heard her aunt say. Peter, have you been wicked? Who was her mother? The wench is dead. I'd hoped to take Elaine to the Eyrie. What am I to do with her there? I have a few notions, said Lord Peter. But just now I am more interested in what I might do with you, my lady. All the sternness melted off her aunt's round pink face, and for a moment, Sansa thought Lysa Arryn was about to cry.
That was a total rawr. I'm more interested in what I might do with you, my lady. Hey, by the way, okay, you saw it, Sandry. Sandry with your loud pencil drawing again. Let's actually check in on what she's drawing. Oh, nice. It's looks like Sansa with the sad old hound.
Yep. Sorry.
That's a big hound.
Yeah, I wanted him to be big.
That's cool.
Because, you know, my dogs are big, so.
That's cool. I like Sansa in this picture. I like the hair especially.
Thank you.
Okay, so... Oh, what's that?
Oh, I was saying it's kind of like just covering him, like, protectively.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Oh, symbolism in the drawing. Very good, Sansa.
Oh, yeah. I try. I keep...
Very good, very good. So, starting with Lysa, the Ice Queen, we see that there are 2 mentions of her melting here. And, of course, that implies her as made of ice. Indeed, when the sternness melts off her face, Sansa thinks that she's going to cry. And this directly implies the tears of Lysa as the meltwater runoff from the melting Ice Queen. It's just like the melting wall being seen as weeping. Lysa is melting and about to weep. So we'll see a ton more of this in her death scene, of course, where she cries and speaks of the tears of Lys right before getting thrown out of the moon door like a falling ice moon meteor, which is what the icy tears symbolize. So ice tears also symbolize the others, as we know, and while speaking of the Vale Lords who are courting her, Lysa mentions the uber annoying Bronzion Royce, and then says, and the others are all swarm around me. Now, of course they do. You're the Night's Queen, Lysa, the queen bee of the icy honeycomb, around whom the others swarm like ice bees. Now, there's a nasty thought. Probably worse than ice spiders when you think about it. Ice bees? No thanks. Kidding aside, think of all the frozen honeycomb symbolism that we've seen so far. To get honey, you need to have bees, and the others are those frozen bees, if you will. They certainly swarm and sting. So, second observation, Lysa is looking for Peter to melt her heart. And it is, of course, Peter who melts the sternness off of her a moment later, and who also makes her cry in her death scene, for that matter. This implies Peter, the Night's King, giving his fire to Lysa and melting her, which fits my hypothesis that it was Night's King was an Azor Ahai person with the fiery blood of the dragon in his veins. This is paralleled in Marillion's advance on Sansa, which began with the line, "The night is chill and wet. Let me warm you." Sorry to make that so creepy, but it is a creepy line, so it deserves all the creep factor I could give it, and that was that. And then it continues with this line.
I never get drunk. Mead only makes me merry. I am on fire.
You are on fire, Merry.
Mm.
That was it. That was the Merry line. Mead only makes Merry merry. That and your name, Merry. But in any case, Marillion is on fire, just like Peter, the fiery Titan's head. And they're melting the hearts of the Ice Queens. They're very parallel scenes. So we've got the Baelish one and the Bard, and they're both trying to warm up these cold women. Marillion puts his greasy, dirty, low-life, filthy hand on Sansa's thigh. How dare he? And then says, "And you as well," implying Sansa as being on fire for him. But of course, she is not. In any case, we will revisit some of this in the next episode, but I wanted to make the point about Peter and Marillion as fiery men trying to melt Ice Queens. So last point, and then we'll be done. As I mentioned, the fingers seem to be analogous to the Eyrie, or you could say that they serve as an extension of the Eyrie. This gives me a great excuse to mention an obscure bit of mythical astronomy that I found in the World of Ice and Fire, which is full of weird little mythical astronomy tales like this, which is how I know George wrote most of it. In any case, this is concerning two ancient first men heroes of the fingers.
Dwyan Shell and John Brightstone, both of whom claimed the title King of the Fingers, went so far as to pay Andal warlords to cross the sea, each thinking to use their swords against the other. Instead, the warlords turned upon their hosts. Within a year, Brightstone had been taken, tortured and beheaded, and Shell roasted alive inside his wooden longhall. An Andal knight named Corwin Corbray took the daughter of the former for his bride and the wife of the latter for his bedwarmer, and claimed the fingers for his own, though Corbray, unlike many of his fellows, never named himself a king, preferring the more modest style of Lord of the Five Fingers.
Yes, this is pretty good stuff. So first off, Dwyan Shell and John Brightstone. Dwyan and John are Night's Watch Rangers, of course, and good friends who are locked in the ice of the wall. And what do you call a bright stone inside of a shell? Well, some kind of meteor locked in an ice moon, of course. John is the dragon locked in ice person, so it's logical to see John Brightstone as being inside the Dwyan shell. And the shell is, of course, Dwyan Shell, and he's burned alive in his wooden longhall, which reminds us that Dwyan, the Night's Watch Ranger, has wooden teeth. Burning in a wooden building, of course, implies someone going into the Weirwood Net, as Azor Ahai did. Think of Dantos on the burning boat. It also implies waking in fire from the ice moon, like the moon-faced Othor when he burned. And also like the King of Winter Wicker Man is supposed to burn to bring the spring. Now, I'm not sure what the meaning is of Corwin Corbray taking the daughters of each slain lord to bed, but it sounds kind of like it's implying him as unifying two oppositional things. Perhaps we can speculate about this in the follow-up Q&A live stream next week. Perhaps it could refer to forging a sword from two different kinds of moon meteors or something like that. I don't know. Because the bright stone in the center would be the piece of fire moon, and the shell would be like, the piece of ice moon that was dawn. We've got the last hero's sword breaking, and then we've got him reappearing with dragon steel. So there's definitely an implication of reforging a broken sword going on. There's lots of broken sword symbolism with the Titan's head and the last hero. So you can see where that is going. But that is a bit of a topic for another time. So the idea of John Brightstone living at the fingers Also has parallels with the idea of Sansa as a lane stone living at the fingers. We mentioned that Peter says the fingers are a great place to live if you're a stone or bright stone, but that Sansa is a stone. And along those same lines, when Sansa gets to the fingers, she compares it to being held prisoner at the Red Keep and thinks, hey, maybe she could make a home here at the fingers. Maybe it's not that bad. Then during their confrontation in the High Hall, Lysa threatens to send Sansa back to the fingers to live. So there's many implications of Sansa Stone, or Lane Stone, living at the fingers, just like John Brightstone lived at the fingers. So we can say that stones live at the fingers. Or they symbolically die and rest there. Or they even really die and rest there, as John Brightstone did. And if the fingers are parallel to the Eyrie as an ice moon place, then we think of the giant's lance and all the ice moon meteor shower symbolism. Then we look back at the fingers again, and we see a giant, truly giant hand holding thousands of cold stones, and one a lane stone, who may still be fiery Sansa Stark underneath. Sansa Stark is indeed in the clutches of an ice giant, or perhaps the giant hands of the others. Check out this amazing scene from the High Hall of the Eyrie.
The High Hall had been closed since Lady Lysa's fall, and it gave Sansa a chill to enter it again. The hall was long and grand and beautiful, she supposed, but she did not like it there. It was a pale, cold place at the best of times. The slender pillars looked like finger bones, and the blue veins in the white marble brought to mind the veins in an old crone's legs. Though 50 silver sconces lined the walls, less than a dozen torches had been lit, so shadows danced upon the floors and pooled in every corner. Their footsteps echoed off the marble, and Sansa could hear the wind rattling the moon door. I must not look at it, she told herself, or else I'll start to shake as badly as Robert.
David, you're muted.
Sorry, guys. So I was just jamming with the chat, actually. Mijicam pointed out that Corwin Corbray, taking the daughter of Tywin Shell and John Brightstone, makes him a figure with two wives. And of course, the Corbrays carry, now anyways, they carry the Valyrian steel sword, Heart Eater. Not Heart Eater. What's it called? God, it's so embarrassing. The Corbray Valyrian steel sword is called Maester Merry. What's it called?
I'm trying to think. I can't remember.
Oh, it's so embarrassing. I know all the Valyrian steel swords. It's Lady Forlorn. That's it. Lady Forlorn. Thank you.
And my mic was muted. Sorry. I was going Lady Forlorn, Lady Forlorn.
And we're like, what's the name? I can't think of it. What is it?
Sorry.
Someone would say it. Yeah, so Lady Forlorn, and of course, Lynn Corbray talks about Lady coming out and being thirsty for a drink. So you get the blood drinking sword idea. It's Valyrian steel. So, and then of course the Corbray sigil is the 3 black ravens holding the 3 hearts on a white field, which I connected to the dragon locked in ice symbol and blood raven because it's a raven carrying a bloody heart. So yeah, so he's got 2 wives. Very cool, very cool. So Maester Merry just read a quote, completely forgot what it was. Oh yes, it was the bone white. Yeah, so basically the pillars in the High Hall, which we know have the white marble veined with blue, are now described as finger bones. And as pale as, what does it say, bone white? Then it says, yeah, okay, so we've got blue veined marble pillars that are now like finger bones. And a moment later, there's a line about the long blue carpet that ran between the rows of bone white pillars. So Martin really seems to want to call our attention to this. First, he's telling us that they are veined with blue, like blue blood. And then he tells us to think of finger bones and the notorious bone white phrase. And here we'll pull another famous quote. Go ahead, Maester Merry.
When he opened his eyes, the other's armor was running down its legs in rivulets as pale blue blood hissed and steamed around the black dragon glass dagger in its throat. It reached down with 2 bone-white hands to pull out the knife, but where its fingers touched the obsidian, they smoked. Sam rolled onto his side, eyes wide as the other shrank and puddled, dissolving away. In 20 heartbeats, its flesh was gone, swirling away into a fine white mist. Beneath were bones like milk glass, pale and shiny, and they were melting too.
There you go. The others have bone-white hands, just like the bone-white fingerbone columns at the Eyrie. The others have blue blood, just like the columns and the stone of the Eyrie. In other words, Sansa is indeed standing in the hands of the others, with their icy fingers closing all around her. No wonder that hall is so cold. This is parallel to the idea of her living at the fingers, where she is, again, inside huge, cold hands. Bone-white stone columns also evoke the ribs of Naga, the sea dragon, which appeared to be petrified weirwood turned to pale stone, and compared to giant trees, which are bone-white. So it's implied that it's also implied, rather, that a weirwood throne once sat in the Grey King's hall, just as a weirwood throne sits in the high hall of the Eyrie, between those bone-white stone columns. So we're just going to have to come back to that topic now, won't we? And that'll be when we do the full Sansa Snowcastle chapter, of course. We'll basically go through that entire chapter, and we'll have to talk about the Weirwood Throne, which obviously is a very significant symbol. And Aziz El-Duri adds that Lady Forlorn is no match for the new and improved model, which is Lady Fivelorn. Thanks, Aziz. Boom. Oh, boy. All right. So in any case, going back to the previous quote, the chilly high hall we'll notice that it's got fewer than a dozen torches lit. So the shadows danced and pooled. Dancing shadows is pretty obvious others talk, since they are the shadows that dance with Sir Waymar. And we will eventually talk about Patchface and his shadows come to dance, my lord, rhymes soon. Shadows that turn into pools. And yes, I'm going to have a lot of fun reading all the Patchface lines. You bet. In any case, shadows that turn into pools. That is Sir Puddles, once again, as the other who Sam stabs and melts is commonly known. It's a white shadow that turned into a puddle or a pool. So once again, we see how unified the symbolism is here. I'm sorry, let me read that again. Once again, we see how unified Martin's symbolism is here. The pooling shadows work together with the blue blood and the bone-white fingers to collectively imply the presence of the others. It's like fourfold symbolic verification, the kind of stuff I always look for. So now what about the dragon glass that melts the other in Sam's scene? Is there an analog for that here in the high hall of the Eyrie by chance? Well, that would be Sansa. And here I will give the hat tip to Maester Merry for this find. Remember when Lysa asked Peter, what had she brought her to melt her heart? And he said, the king's peace. And she wasn't impressed. And then he said, and my daughter Elaine. But the thing is, Elaine, aka Sansa, is the king's piece. P-I-E-C-E, as in chess piece. Don't forget, at the end of the previous chapter, that's the one that ends with everyone on board the Merlin King, and Peter gives that little speech about Sansa, or to Sansa rather, about players and pieces, and about everyone starts out as a piece, and Cersei thinks she's a player, but she's really a piece, yada, yada, yada. So giving a shout out to my friends at Pawn to Player blog, which is a place where you can find all things Sansa and much more. Sansa's arc can indeed be summarized as pawn to player, and it flows from this conversation with Peter about Sansa's obvious trajectory towards power and leadership. So Sansa is the king's piece. First, she was the pawn of Joffrey, and now she's the pawn of Peter the Merlin King and the symbolic Night's King. In the mythical astronomy sense, she's also a piece of the fire moon meteor, a piece of the fire moon, which is a fire moon meteor, that enters the ice moon. And when the fire moon meteor wakes, it will indeed melt the ice moon. So what did Peter bring to melt Lysa's icy heart? The king's piece, Sansa, who is a burnt piece of the fire moon. And I'll also point out that fire moon meteors are often depicted, or sometimes depicted, as dragon glass. And Sansa parallels Jon as the dragon locked in ice. And of course, dragon glass is Jon's symbol, which is very good for melting ice. So you could think of dragon glass as the bright stone when it is in the form of a lit glass candle as well. So yeah, Sansa would be the analog to the dragon glass that melts the ice. So what we're seeing at the Eyrie with Sansa and Lysa appears to be some sort of ice queen, like basically a new ice queen supplanting the old one. Or perhaps we might say that dead Nissa Nissa, or Nissa Nissa's ghost, is taking over the ice moon and evicting the original Night's Queen. This matches the mythical astronomy of my theory about the Dawn meteor, which is that it was a piece of the ice moon, which was cracked off when the original fire moon meteor hit the ice moon and became the dragon locked in ice. So it's like, see this ice moon, fire moon meteor comes in, and it kicks out a little piece of ice, which is like Lysa being kicked out of the Vale when Sansa comes there. And indeed, almost as soon as Peter brings the dead Nissa Nissa figure of Sansa to the Eyrie, Lysa ends up falling out the moon door like a melting tear, weeping all the way. An icy moon maiden, not a midden. There's some cesspool humor for you, unintentional. An icy moon maiden flying out the moon door and falling from the sky is pretty clear ice moon meteor symbolism, if anything is, right? And once again, this happens as a direct result of a fire moon remnant impacting the Eyrie, just as I've speculated all the way back in my very first draft, more than 3 years ago. That's right, guys, 3 years ago. I was talking about Dawn as an ice moon meteor kicked out of the ice moon. So it's pretty cool to find symbolism supporting that. So in any case, this supplanting idea will be a major topic of the next episode or two. And that's where we're going to try to drill down on the relationship between dead Nissa Nissa and Night's Queen, and what exactly happens inside the ice moon part of the underworld. We'll also go deeper on the idea of the Weirwood Net acting as a sort of portal from fire to ice. And we'll talk about the Weirwoods as a bridge between the fire and ice realms, or between the two moons. And this is, of course, all about the Cosmic River and the frozen pond and squishers and patchface and all the aquatic symbolism. It's going to be the most magical, I should say that the Signs and Portals series, rather, is going to be the most magical and metaphysical series yet. And we will be building on all of the prior episodes of Mythical Astronomy, and we'll be tying in the crucial triumvirate of Azor Ahai and dragons, Green Seers and Weirwoods, and others, and ice magic. So thanks for joining me, guys, and I will see you next time.
Ooh, we made it.
We made it.
Ooh, pretty old town. Clapping.
3 hours, and we've got 133 viewers. Y'all are crazy. We've had the same like 130 to 140 people basically the entire time, and that just blows me away, guys. I'm sitting in my basement, or standing in my basement since I have a standing desk, and I'm talking about Song of Ice and Fire with a couple of my friends on YouTube, and all y'all are interested for 3 hours. It's just awesome. It makes me feel good, and it makes up for all the YouTube bullshit and all that. So thank you, guys, and I hope you enjoyed the episode.
I did, for sure.
Me three.
I'm sure they did.
Thanks. I see a bunch of clapping emojis in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. And let's see what Sanrixian's got going on.
Oh, hey. I'm painting some purple right now. Just wanted to finish this up a little bit before I moved on to silly things, because I'm sure we're going to get to silly things. We always do.
Well, I love your non-silly drawings, for sure.
Yeah.
You've done a couple of real nice ones tonight.
Thank you.
Woo. So, Maester Merry, thoughts on the episode there?
It was a great one. Love Sansa. Did you guys catch Nienna the Wise's comment about... I just was looking in the chat, and she made a great comment comparing my skin has turned from porcelain to ivory to steel to dragon steel as dragon glass.
Nice. I
And
didn't
I
see
thought
yeah.
that.
that was interesting. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, that's one jumped out to me. Like the first time I reread that with Sansa as a moon meteor in mind, I was like, wait, her skin is turning to steel. Hot damn. That is the kind of thing you look for. Oh, you gave the sad old hound blue eyes. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, he's blind, so right. It should be gray eyes, if we're being
That's
honest.
fine. That's fine. Very cool. So we've got a couple more donations that have come in, looks like. Let's see. We've got Susan Baluk, who did not send a message, but sent in a donation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Melanie, good friend Melanie, patron, Twitteros member, essay writer. She sent in a 666 donation. Thank you, Melanie. You know I always love those. Laura Doria sent in a donation. No comment either, but thank you very much, Laura. So there it is. It's working. And oh, look, there's a couple of new patrons. I won't say their names because I don't always know if people want their full names read out, but there's a Frederick who signed up. Thank you. And another patron, Stein, has upped their pledge during this podcast. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Thank you, guys. So cool. That's very cool.
Super cool, you guys.
All right. So I will now look into the chat. Hunter S. Lucifer. Oh, that's good. Thanks, Jay's board. That's good. Sanrixian, can I
Yeah,
can I
I'm
get
on
some?
it.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah. I draw the line at the Cartman voice. Jinxley Air. You're always drawing lines and stuff, man. You just tell me what's okay and what's not, and I'll be sure to maybe follow that. Oh, Steen. Christine. Oh yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, so I got thanks for hanging out, Aziz. You were here like the whole time, man. That's cool, dude. You know, it's always flattering. Oh no, boundaries. Yes, I'm threatened. But you know, it's us content creators, we drop into each other's events frequently, but usually we don't have time to hang out the whole time because we got to create content. It takes a lot of damn time. So very flattering when somebody hangs out. So thanks, Aziz. And yeah, don't forget to bring a towel. See, Jinx is trying to put me in timeout. It's going to be fun having Jinx on the live stream. How's that going to go, you guys? What do you think?
I think you're going to get owned. I'm pretty sure.
Is she going to make me cry?
I don't know if she's going to cry. I just think she's going to be awesome, and they'll be owned.
I'm looking forward to it. I love strong women. They're great.
I think a couple people were asking for a review of the dates of when the next episodes are being released. I think the Between Two Weirwoods episodes that you were asking about or talking about earlier.
Yeah, so the episode with Jinx is going to be, I guess, in 2 weeks on the 17th. And the one on religion with Sanri and Nieta the Wise, a.k.a. Gretchen Ellis, and Bryn Beefish will be the following week, which I believe is either the 25th or the 26th.
26th.
So, and Stein Fleming pipes in to say it's Stina. Well, thank you, Stina, for your donation. And thanks for everybody who sent in the donation. Yeah, thanks to the moderators. I know Crowfood's daughter had to cut out of like 10 minutes ago, but she was there the whole time dropping links and shit. So thanks, Crowfood's daughter. And of course, you guys know the Disputed Lands is her YouTube channel. So guys, if you've got any questions, I got like maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes here where we can take a few questions and let Sanrixian draw a little bit. And of course, Maester Merry, feel free to pipe in with any thoughts you have. If you'd like to expand on anything that we talked about, or
I have thoughts. I'll let you know.
There it is.
There we go.
And yes, very nice. Very nice.
So one thing that I think is interesting, maybe as a question for you, is, how do you manage, like, as someone that's writing about such a such a complex work that George has put together? When did you arrive at the decision, and how did you arrive at the decision to split this off from your last section? And had you always planned to do some of this content as separate from the Blood of the Other series?
So that's a great question, and it definitely, when I started writing about Sansa and the Vale, I thought it was going to be a Moons of Ice and Fire series, but then I got to that chapter with her going through the Godswood and into the Dragon Underworld, and I started catching all the Weirwood Goddess stuff, and I was like, oh shit, this is really all about the portals idea. Because you guys have actually had the portals thing in my brain for a long time. It's basically amounts to the Weirwood tree as being in between both moons, or being symbolic of both moons at the same time. Imagine the Weirwood tree as like the cosmic axis. And what are those little spinning things they put above a baby's crib that spin around with all the little... A mobile, right. So imagine a mobile attached to the top of the Weirwood tree, spinning around with the two moons like this, going. So essentially the Weirwood is like a bridge. It's like a portal. It goes from ice to fire. And the idea of the fire moon goddess going into the ice moon, she's got to go through all this Weirwood like transitionary stages to get to the ice moon. And that's when I realized that I had basically, this is going to transition into Ravenous Readers Under the Sea stuff, which is all about the Weirwood net as being analogous to the cosmic ocean or the cold lake, under the ice and all that stuff. And so when I started to sniff out this Weirwood portal action in Sansa's journey to the Eyrie, that's when I realized that Signs and Portals would be a cool title that would encompass Ravenous Readers Under the Sea stuff, as well as all the Weirwood sort of portal and bridge stuff. Because, I've talked about the weir, the fishing weir before, right? It's a wooden structure that spans across a river, and it sort of sifts the river, and it catches the fish and lets the water pass through. It can also be used to regulate the flow of the river. It's also a bridge, because it's basically a wooden thing that spans the river, so you can walk across it. So a weir is also a bridge, and this ties into scenes like the Bridge of Dream, where all the stone men are. And there's tons of Weirwood symbolism going on, and there's under the sea symbolism and the bridge and all this crap. So that's kind of like the quick preview of where the series is going. And to answer your question, when I picked up on the portal stuff in those chapters is when I realized this wasn't a Moons of Ice and Fire episode, but actually a good place to begin talking about the portals. And that's one of the reasons why I've held off on the Vale for so long, is because there's a ton of portal stuff in all these chapters.
I think we're getting a lot of good questions in the chat. Joe Magician just asked if there's specific books that you recommend for the symbolism and mythological connections.
I don't really read mythology books. I mostly research on the internet, which ends up drawing from a lot of different people. So I don't have a ton of book recommendations. The books that I've read are more about the overall function of mythology, like Joseph Campbell or some of Graham Hancock's stuff. But that's not about specific mythology so much as it is mythology in general, and it has random things. I always recommend Hamlet's Mill really highly. I think that's the best work of comparative mythology that I've ever read. And it really talks about the cosmic axis a lot, which is what the cosmic tree is. Like, imagine the axis of the earth. If you're standing on Earth, the north, the reason why we have a quote unquote North Star is because it's the star at the top of the celestial axis. So when the earth turns, this, it turns on an axis, and the star that's at that point appears not to move. And so this axis is perceived as the world tree or cosmic tree. And that's basically where we're going. And there's going to be a lot of ideas in this Signs and Portals series, which I originally also thought were going to be in the Weirwood Compendium series. that they're going to be moved into it. So, Mary, hit me up with some other questions you saw.
Yeah, so first a joke question. Do you think there's fake news on the Weirwood net from Jay? I thought that was funny. And then Laura D said she's really interested in Patchface. He's very interesting and he'll play some part of the story. And I know that you're planning to talk about Patchface later in this series. Do you have any quick comments about him?
Yeah, so like Patchface says, I will lead them into the sea and out again. And if you think about the sea as the cosmic ocean or the underworld or the Weirwood net, then you've got a horned figure leading people into the Weirwood net and then back out of the Weirwood net. And that's total Azor Ahai stuff. So yeah, Patchface is awesome. He's a horned lord, and he's he's prophesies about what's going on under the sea. And everything that's happening under the sea is basically happening in the Weirwood net. So that's going to be where we're going to find out about the crows being white as snow, for example. That cast the others as equivalents of the Night's Watch crows, but white crows, kind of like the white ravens. So yeah, Patchface is great.
Don1 asked a question, which I'm sure a lot of people in the chat second, which is, what's your prediction for Sansa's endgame?
Well, I've said many times that she's the person I'm the most sure about living to the end of the story. I'm just dead certain that she's going to survive. And it's just to see where her whole arc is leading to, her coming into power, all the lessons she's been learning, and the rekindling. Basically, I think Sansa's endgame will involve her rekindling her Stark identity and reconciling everything that she's learned with her Stark nature and becoming a powerhouse politician, potentially even the queen of all Westeros, if there is such a thing. I think more likely she'll be the queen in the north. So yeah, I see Joe's got a, what are we talking about here? There's a Joe question people are trying to second.
He's asking about everyone's favorite strains of weed.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, Matt.
I'm gonna hard pass on that question.
Candy Kush, go.
OG Kush. Sour Diesel. Anyways. Yeah, so there's a lot of Queen Elizabeth parallels to Sansa, I've heard. I'm not big into British history, so I'm not keen on that, but enough people have said it to where I think it's probably true. And let's see here. What are we got a bunch of Neil Gaiman chat. I don't know.
Yeah, a bunch of people are probably mentioning his Norse mythology book, which is really great, and it's written in a narrative style. It's kind of like if you were to listen to old Nan tell you the Norse myths. It's pretty great.
Awesome. Yeah, that's actually a good one for me because my knowledge of Norse mythology is very patchy. And there's so many versions of everything out there. It's almost hard to find just like a basic crash course in it. So yeah, maybe I'll check that one out.
You should. It's really good.
A million people have recommended it to me for sure.
Someone, Midgicam, asked, I feel like there has to be more of a deeper meaning for the Sansa and the Hound figure combination because it keeps coming up.
Yeah, so like I said, we need to do a whole episode on the Hound because think about Barrack's Cave, all right? The Hound goes into the Weirwood net underworld of Barrack's Cave. He fights a sword duel with Azor Ahai. The Hound's sword is called a cold sword. He breaks Azor Ahai's sword in half and then essentially leaves with a Stark girl. He doesn't take Arya right then, but very soon after that fight, Arya goes outside and the Hound snatches her. So that's right away. You can see there's some crazy symbolism going on there. We've got this Hellhound, ice and fire figure because Sandor is burned, but also wears the icy Kingsguard armor. That gives you the ice and fire, sort of Eldritch Shadow Chaser, good other symbolism. Then he charges into the Weirwood net and rescues a Stark, defeats Azor Ahai. So there's some crazy shit going on there. And we've got to, dig into that in order to figure out everything that's going on. But clearly Sansa seems to have this Hellhound protector figure. It's pretty important. Like when Sandor disappears, she gets the hound, the old sad blind hound and Lothor. So obviously it's a very important thing we'll have to keep developing.
Indeed.
There's a question about the Black Gate, as a portal. And I'm mentioning, this is Tracy Reeves. How about the Black Gate as a portal that drips water on Bran that's salty as a tear?
Yeah, I mean, bingo. This is what I mean by like these essays write themselves. Once you start pulling on a thread, you can see, oh yeah, there's a portal in the icy Vale of Tears that is the wall, and it's a weirwood portal, and you've got the tears, and it's eating people. Just like when Jon walks into the wall, it says he's being swallowed by the gullet of an ice dragon. And we talked about when Cat goes into the rock face, the mouth of the rock face at the castle sky. It's like being swallowed by the ice moon as well. So, yeah.
House Thompson asked if there's a parallel between the Eyrie and Troy, if Sansa is a face that could launch 1,000 ships.
So we found the Helen of Troy parallels with Elenai and with Daenerys, because the 1,000 ships, quote unquote, of the Iron Fleet are launched to rescue Daenerys, and Victarion sees clouds scuttling across the face of the moon, like the fleet of the Ironborn scuttling across the face of the moon. So you've got this idea of a moon face that launches 1,000 ships, and of course, if you think of the ships as meteors, you can think of a moon face launching meteor ships. And so, yeah, there's a lot of Helen symbolism around Dany and Elenai. I haven't found it with Sansa, but they're parallel Fire Moon characters, so it may be there if we look. Let's see what Sanrixian doing.
Oh, no.
Nice.
Yeah.
For your
Fire milk. For your wolf boo-boos. That's cool. I like your Maester Lewin, too.
Thank you.
He doesn't have feet, but whatever. He does look cuddly.
Now he has hobbit feet, and I'm not sure why. We'll just leave that. Yeah.
Cool. And by the way, I did promise a musical presentation of Patreon names today. However, we're 3.5 hours in. And we are going to do an actual live stream Q&A next week. So I'll give you all a chance to send in questions and comments throughout the week like I usually do, so I can read them all and take questions from my Patreon folks. And we'll do a normal Q&A next week. We'll obviously have Sanri back to draw. Maester Merry, you're welcome to come if you are free. And we will do our Q&A thing. And then I think I will just go ahead and save the musical presentation for then. It's going to be about 8 or 9 minutes. And it's going to be fun and cool. I'm going to read a bunch of Patreon names and play some bass for y'all. But I think I'll save that for next week, since we're 3.5 hours in.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like a good plan. Do you need to go to the little girl's room by now, Mary?
We're getting there. We're getting there.
How are your crying babies doing? Any of them stolen by any Sams yet, or are you good?
Just one crying baby, and not crying today, just making random loud noises. So I'll settle for happy sounds.
That's cool. That's cool. Oh, Painkiller Jane says, any mention of the Weeping Lady of Liss crying silver tears? Yeah, absolutely. I was going to talk about that in the next episode. Yeah. But of course, we are going to talk about Lysa getting thrown out the moon door, and she's talking about the tears of Liss while that happens. So this is just another layer of Weeping Ice Moon Maiden stuff piled on. And you see what I always say, like when George is trying to tell you something, he tells you in like 5 different ways. And once you figure it out, you don't have to feel too, fuzzy about it anymore. So thanks, Painkiller Jane. Dude, if you ever want to come on camera, you are welcome to come on a live stream. I mean, you supply as much information to this podcast as anybody. So yeah, consider that an open invitation.
She's
PKJ.
Brilliant.
She is.
Oh no, she's brilliant.
Oh, dude, she is crazy brilliant. So, all right, guys, I don't see any more questions flowing at me. So let's see what Sanrixian has. She's finishing up the fire. There we go. Nice.
Yeah. There we go.
Cool.
Don't drink it. That's all I have to say.
Cool. Well, thanks for everyone who came out. And Mary, why don't you tell us about your YouTube channel one final time?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is up from under Winterfell. Right now, I am working on a series of essays on Bravos. I have the first 3 essays in the series posted on my YouTube channel. The next essay should come out next week, and it will be a simultaneous release of the text and the YouTube video, and it is probably going to rely very heavily on some of my conversations with Wiz the Smith about the Hollow Hills and the magic of the Children of the Forest, and kind of delve into some of the parallels between the Children of the Forest, the Hollow Hills, and what we see in the Hollow Hill where the House of Black and White is, and the caves and tunnels that are around there. So look for that next week.
Yeah, totally. The House of Black and White is a giant Hollow Hill. And of course, Wiz the Smith is a very good friend back from Westeros.org. His Hollow Hill essay was a prize-winning essay, one of the essays of the year. It is legendary. And I don't know if there's anybody in the chat, maybe Painkiller, or Emma, can you dig up that Hollow Hill essay and leave a link? Because that is absolutely required reading. If you like my podcast, there is no reason for you not to read Wiz the Smith's Hollow Hills essay. It is awesome. And it's all about these underground Weirwood Cave locations. And once you start comparing them all, you really can see some things pop out at you. So I'll wait for one of you guys to drop the link in there.
I think I just got it.
Cool. Thanks, Maester Merry. Yeah, you guys are in for a treat. If you haven't read that one, you're in for a big treat. That one's awesome. The Hollow Hills. So thanks to everyone who sent in donations to mythalastronomy@paypal.me today. Really appreciate that. I know it's not quite as instant gratification as the super chats that light up with orange and put your name on the top and stuff. So I really appreciate you guys taking the extra trouble to dick around with the website and send me that support. Really appreciate that. And of course, if you enjoy the podcast and you have the means to do so, then sign up for Patreon and get yourself a nerdy nickname, and we'll read it aloud. So there you go. And Sanrixian, of course, Moon Country. Oh, that's nice.
Excellent.
Nice. Oh, yeah, I was going to ask for my 5 o'clock shout out, but you got it in there. Cool.
Yep.
Very cool. Thank you, Sandra. I am honored, as always, by your animations.
You're welcome.
And of course, Sanrixian.com is where you can find cool Sanrixian t-shirt and prints and pins and stickers and all kinds of cool crap. We are still working on getting Mythical Astronomy t-shirts on Sanrixian.com, but that is happening. And if you're one of those few patrons who has promised a t-shirt and still hasn't gotten one, we haven't forgotten about you. We got your address and information, and we will send you a t-shirt when we make more. It is happening. So,
it is happening.
There you go. Hand of the Dragon. Thank you. Coming through for everyone.
Woo.
So with that, guys, thank you very much for coming. And I will see you next Sunday, same time, same bat channel. And we'll be doing live Q&A and just doing a little more free-for-all talk about all this stuff. You can bring up anything you want. Send me questions about Sansa. And I'll play a little bass for y'all next week. So thanks, everybody. And sayonara.